A disoriented man named Shiba Yuga tries to ground himself in a strange courtroom. He recalls being a 29-year-old unemployed man, last seen drinking in Shinjuku. From a high balcony, a council of otherworldly beings confirms his identity is correct. A regal king with a massive white beard glares down with severe judgment. Yuga sweats, overwhelmed by the impossible scene, wondering if it's all a dream. The chapter title confirms this is indeed the law court of another world. A blonde man in a red beret observes the proceedings with a sharp gaze. The dark-haired elf girl stands silently, her expression a mask of indifference. His memory shifts to a lively izakaya, raising a glass for a toast. He happily remarks how long it's been since this group got together. His friend good-naturedly points out that Yuga is always the one leading them. A female friend observes that they haven't changed, reassured by his handsomeness. From above, his friend notes that while Yuga is handsome, his job title has changed. His friends are all successful legal professionals, a court official and a prosecutor. The spiky-haired friend complains about his own difficult job and stingy boss. Challenged about his earnings, Yuga deflects, saying he's still studying for the bar. He confidently boasts that he'll earn more than all of them once he passes. His confident boast is met with an awkward, pitying silence from his friends. His friends exchange worried glances, unsure of how to respond to his bravado. The woman gently changes the subject, thanking him for coming and urging them to drink. Uncomfortable, Yuga abruptly announces he is going to the restroom to escape. He feels a wave of confusion and humiliation wash over him. Alone in the restroom, his confident facade begins to crumble away. His friend confronts him, asking why he's so upset about failing 5 times. His friends murmur, realizing the topic of his failures is a sensitive one. One friend tries to brush off the tension with a nervous laugh. He lashes out, telling his successful friend not to associate with a failure. The memory fades to him, standing alone on an overpass, contemplating death. He despairs over his lack of a career and his crushing student debt. His friends now feel like they belong to a different, inaccessible world. He concludes that his only option is to die and start his life over. But his despair suddenly twists into a wide, almost manic grin. He rejects the idea of death, declaring that he could never go through with it. He shouts into the night, vowing that he will become a great lawyer. In his fervor, he leans too far, and the old railing gives way. His expression freezes in shock as he begins his terrifying plunge. As he falls, he screams a final, desperate challenge to God for trials. He watches in horror as the piece of railing falls with him. His treasured law book tumbles through the air, a symbol of his failed dream. His fall is met not by asphalt, but by a girl's impossibly cheerful face. He finds himself in a starry void, utterly bewildered by the sudden change. A girl in a gothic Lolita dress floats above him, leaving him speechless. She asks if he likes her outfit, which she based on Japanese fashion. Overwhelmed and confused, he can only manage to ask who she is. She beams proudly, making the grand proclamation that she is, in fact, God. She then commands him to bow before her and offer up a tribute. He tries to rationalize this, wondering if it's some custom he's unaware of. She clarifies that she's from another world and specifically summoned him here. With an excited sparkle in her eye, she invites him to her world. He dismisses her as a foreigner who is too obsessed with Japanese pop culture. He awkwardly tries to de-escalate, asking where her parents or guardians are. Annoyed by his skepticism, she casually slaps his face away from her. Still trying to be polite, he bows and asks her to tell him where they are. His politeness only irritates her more, and she accuses him of doubting her. He asks what to call her, and she insists he call her God-sama. With a strained smile, he wearily agrees to her demand. Her eye fills the screen, a swirling galaxy, as she vows to show him her power. Instantly, he finds himself kneeling on a cobblestone street in a medieval town. The god girl appears behind him, smugly asking if he was impressed by her display. He scrambles to his feet, shouting in disbelief, demanding to know what she did. She proudly introduces the location as Luano, a small nation in her world. Yuga takes in the unbelievable scene, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. He observes the architecture, wondering if he's somehow been transported to Europe. A formidable blonde warrior with an eye patch watches them from a distance. The god girl admits to him that her world is not doing very well. She explains that civilization is stagnant due to a lack of conflict. So, she decided to peek into his world to look for a solution. She found his country, Japan, to be a rather nice and peaceful place. This gave her a brilliant idea, which she presents with a snap. She will introduce Japan's laws to her world, and he will be its lawyer. She admits she would have preferred a real lawyer, but circumstances were difficult. Her smile turns mischievous, reminding him that he was conveniently about to die. He questions being dead, but she explains she must limit her divine interference. It was simply the most convenient and efficient way to summon a soul. He protests, but she waves him off, telling him to wait for the welcome. She looks at him with a serious, knowing expression. Then she bursts into a triumphant laugh, dismissing his protests as nonsense. She reminds him of his own desperate plea for trials and tribulations. He realizes his wish was granted as she expresses her high expectations for him. With a brilliant, sparkling smile, she prepares to make her final decree. She officially declares that from this day forward, he is a lawyer. He is left alone on the street as she vanishes in a flash of light. He mutters about his new god boss, still trying to understand his location. He observes the townsfolk, confirming this place is completely foreign to him. A cheerful market woman and a bipedal lizardman pass by him. The lizard man points, noting how strange Yuga's modern clothing is here. He walks on, feeling like he's been dropped into a role-playing game. He cynically wonders if his first case will be defending a thieving lizardman. He suddenly spots a figure in the distance and calls out to them. A carriage driver arrogantly shouts for the common folk to clear the way. Yuga watches from the side as the nobleman's carriage barrels down the street. A nearby citizen curses the entitled nobility under his breath. Inside, the nobleman, Lord Gelvia, looks on with disdain. Yuga watches the scene with irritation, calling out to a nearby mother. A small girl suddenly darts into the street, causing Yuga to look on in alarm. The girl is chasing after her mother, who has just gone through a doorway. She runs directly into the path of the speeding, out-of-control carriage. Yuga's eyes widen in sheer horror as he realizes the imminent danger. A faint shimmer of magic appears around a nearby cloaked elf's hand. But before she can act, Yuga's fist slams into the carriage with impossible force. A horse-drawn carriage barrels down a cobblestone street, directly towards a small child. The little girl sits frozen on the ground, stunned and helpless in its path. Tears well in her eyes as she begins to cry out for her mother. Her mother watches in horror from the side of the road as the girl wails. Yuga and other bystanders watch in shock as the carriage is violently stopped. A guard shouts that they are under attack. His master asks if he is all right. Yuga looks on, a bead of nervous sweat tracing a path down his temple. The guard orders his men to protect their master, demanding to know the attack's origin. The cloaked elf, Donatella, notes that the assailant is just a commoner. Donatella stands perfectly still, her face an unreadable, stoic mask. The carriage guards look on, confused and uncertain of what just happened. One guard identifies her as an elf, screaming that it's a rebellion. Yuga watches the chaos erupt from between the fleeing townspeople. He wonders with a strange smile if he should probably run away too. A knight's armored leg slams down, commanding everyone to halt. Liliana Omgard of the Royal Guard announces she is taking command of the scene. She orders the elf to be taken into custody, stating there is no room for argument. Donatella looks down, her expression somber as she is apprehended by the guards. Lord Gelvia furiously demands the knight execute the filthy elf traitor immediately. Liliana coolly refuses his command, informing him that such times have passed. The nobleman sneers, insulted by the impertinence of a mere knight. Liliana commands her soldiers to take Donatella away, ensuring she doesn't escape. Yuga stands awkwardly to the side as the situation is brought under control. Liliana turns to him, asking if he is Shiba Yuga, which he nervously confirms. She informs him that he is to follow her, as the king himself has summoned him. Yuga is stunned, barely able to process that she means the actual king. A regal figure with a magnificent white beard is introduced as King Marius Luano. Yuga nervously thinks to himself that this man is definitely a king. Liliana forcefully shoves his head down, scolding him for not bowing. The king tells him to be at ease, as God has already told him about Yuga. Yuga, sweating, confirms that he is, in fact, supposed to be the lawyer. The king explains that God has gifted their kingdom the laws of Japan. He presents the complete book of Luano law for all future trials. The god girl appears, explaining that this is her will for the kingdom's development. The king admits they are struggling to understand the new laws and are studying frantically. Yuga listens intently, his expression serious as he takes in the information. The king declares that the entire future of Luano now rests on Yuga's shoulders. Yuga internally panics, hoping God didn't mention his 5-bar exam failures. The god girl announces an incident has occurred and tells Liliana to open the court. Utterly shocked, Yuga is led away by Liliana, questioning the suddenness of it all. He is brought into a vast, empty courtroom, bathed in solemn rays of light. A courtier in a beret sits at a desk, calmly reading a book. The strange panel of judges, including a lizardman, takes its seats. The courtroom gallery is empty, its balustrade awaiting the spectators. Yuga looks around in awe, exclaiming that this is a real courtroom. The king asks Yuga what he thinks, noting it resembles the courts of Japan. Yuga admits to himself that as a student, he's never actually been in one. The king declares this a historic trial and commands all to be aware of their duty. Yuga feels overwhelmed, having been brought to a fantasy world to stand trial. The prosecutor is introduced as the stern royal guard commander, Joan Wyson. Yuga thinks that despite the chaos, there is one thing he can say for sure. A slow, confident smile spreads across his face as he thinks this is the best. He recalls the years he spent studying just for the chance to stand here. He clenches his fist, his resolve hardening as he decides he will do it. He declares that he is a lawyer and commands the court to be in session. The next chapter begins with Yuga standing ready in the nearly empty courtroom. He steels himself for whatever may come, firm in his new identity as a lawyer. From his high throne, King Marius orders the defendant to be brought in. The courtroom doors creak open as guards escort the accused inside. Yuga lets out a small, sharp gasp of recognition. Donatella is led forward, her hands bound with rope, her expression impassive. Yuga realizes with a shock that the defendant is the girl from the street. The gallery murmurs with prejudice, mocking the elf and her pointed ears. A guard leads Donatella into the defendant's box. The prosecutor, Joan Wyson, formally introduces himself to the court. He states that though the trial's form is new, his desire to punish the guilty has not changed. He vows to make the criminal atone for her sins under this new Japanese law. Yuga grimaces, realizing this confident, handsome man is his adversary. Joan begins his opening statement, preparing to lay out the defendant's crimes. He formally identifies the accused as Donatella Bastianeri. He frames the case as a continuation of the bloody history of war with the elves. He declares that her race has once again bared its fangs and he cannot forgive it. The gallery agrees, shouting for the elf to be hanged. Joan details the crime. An explosion spell was used against Lord Gelvia's carriage. He states that Donatella's magic caused injury to the noble, Lord Gelvia. He declares that under the kingdom's traditional laws, the only punishment is death. However, under the new law for bodily harm, the sentence is up to 15 years. Yuga listens, thinking that the prosecutor is skipping over crucial details. The king asks the defendant if she has anything to say in her defense. Yuga quietly urges Donatella to explain what happened so she won't be found guilty. Donatella flatly states she has nothing to say, leaving Yuga utterly shocked. He insists that there must be something she should say to defend herself. She turns away from him, completely ignoring his desperate pleas. Yuga internally screams in frustration, questioning why she is ignoring him. He stands and declares to the court that he has a counter-argument to present. He confidently cites Penal Code Article 37, the principle of emergency evasion. The king, intrigued by the term, examines it through a magnifying glass. Yuga insists there were many witnesses to the event, including Liliana. The king turns to Liliana, asking her to confirm the facts of the incident. Liliana testifies that a young girl, Sonia Campbell, was about to be run over. Yuga argues that the conditions for emergency evasion have therefore been met. Joan smirks, telling Yuga that while he has read the law, he doesn't understand it. Yuga explains the legal concept of comparing the averted harm to the harm caused. He argues that since Donatella saved Sonia's life, she has met the law's requirements. Joan throws his head back and lets out a long, uproarious laugh. Yuga demands to know what is so funny about his legal argument. Joan mockingly asks if he truly believes a commoner's life is more valuable than a noble's. Lord Gelvia agrees, proclaiming his own great lineage makes him far more important. Joan's face twists with rage as he screams at Yuga not to joke with him. Yuga is left speechless, stunned by this fundamental alien system of values. Lord Gelvia's supporter is shocked, but the nobleman dismisses the lawyer's words as obvious. King Marius asks Yuga if the defense has any counter-arguments, catching him off guard. In the dock, Donatella looks down, her expression somber and resigned. Yuga stammers, unsure how to begin, as Donatella questions his hesitation from the side. From the gallery, a diverse crowd of citizens looks on with clear disapproval. Lord Gelvia and another nobleman sneer, noting that the lawyer has fallen silent, as expected. Gelvia declares that an elf injured a noble, and there is no room for debate. A hand rests on the dock's railing as a crucial thought begins to form. The nobleman scoffs at the proposed 15-year sentence, calling it laughably lenient. He rises to his feet, declaring this incident proves elves are a dangerous race. He concludes that for the safety of all, the entire elven race must be eradicated. The gallery erupts in a furious chant, demanding the elf be killed and hanged. King Marius slams his fist down, his powerful voice bellowing for silence in the court. He announces a recess before the verdict, cutting off Yuga's attempt to protest. Liliana confirms the recess, leaving a shocked Yuga reaching out in protest. A guard stands watch outside the heavy doors of a private chamber. Yuga clutches his head in frustration, railing against this world's skewed values. He questions how he can possibly apply Japanese law in such a different culture. Donatella remains completely silent, her face an unreadable, stoic mask. Yuga turns on her, desperately asking why she won't explain what happened. She closes her eyes, completely ignoring his frantic pleas for her to speak. Liliana tells him to stop shouting, as his anger will accomplish nothing. She explains that elves are naturally cautious and her silence is to be expected. Yuga scoffs at the notion, retorting that her caution is a death sentence. He insists that in her situation, she cannot afford to be cautious, shocking Liliana. He describes a brutal world where elves are hunted, where the incautious are already dead. Donatella finally speaks, revealing her father was human, making her a half-elf. Liliana, taken aback by the revelation, offers a sincere apology for her generalization. Donatella lets out a quiet, dismissive sound, her eyes closed. Yuga realizes the prejudice runs deeper than he imagined, but he must press on. He sits before her, stating that as her lawyer, he needs her trust and cooperation. She scoffs at his plea, questioning what good her cooperation would do. She cynically asks what she would gain from helping, given his failed arguments. Yuga is left speechless by her logic, muttering for her to leave him alone. Seated across the table, Donatella declares with chilling certainty that this trial is lost. Yuga, utterly confused, asks why she did it then. He demands to know why she saved Sonia if she knew this would be the outcome. She admits that, in retrospect, she believes her own actions were foolish. Her hard expression softens as she prepares to reveal her true, painful motivation. She explains that she once had a younger sister, though she is now dead. A memory surfaces of her sister, who looked exactly like the girl Sonia. She couldn't bear to watch her sister die a second time. That was the only reason. Yuga is stunned into silence by the profound tragedy of her story. Overcome with empathy, tears begin to stream down his face, surprising everyone. Liliana asks why he is crying, offering him a handkerchief. He sobs that it's too cruel for her to be punished for saving her sister. Donatella looks on, a bead of sweat on her temple, completely baffled by him. She tells him she doesn't understand him or what he's talking about. Yuga continues to weep as Liliana looks on, her expression one of pure exasperation. He turns to Liliana, asking if she doesn't find the whole situation strange. She tells him not to be so familiar, but concedes that she understands his feelings. She explains that nobles are revered for their lineage and service to the kingdom. Yuga argues that a girl's life was saved while the noble only suffered an injury. He blows his nose, insisting that the disparity in value is obviously wrong. Liliana agrees that Lord Gelvia's behavior is often excessive and problematic. She notes his reckless actions are a violation of law and the king's authority. In fact, she continues, many nobles are forgetting their loyalty to the king. The king is not pleased with their arrogance, but must proceed with caution. Actions that undermine the king's authority, she explains, cannot be permitted. Ultimately, such behavior threatens the peace of the nation and its people. She explains that the nobles are independent entities, separate from the king's direct rule. They can only be disciplined if there is a sufficiently compelling reason. Liliana says it's time to return to court, but Yuga tells her to wait. She turns back, confused, asking what he just said. He insists it's not time yet, telling her to forget it for a moment. He suddenly panics, frantically patting his pockets, realizing something is missing. Liliana asks what he's doing as he finds the lost item with a gasp of relief. He holds up his distinctive black and white necktie, covered in heart patterns. Donatella asks about the strange, gaudy piece of cloth he seems to treasure. Yuga explains it is not a charm, but a ritual to steel his resolve for a fight. He says that wearing a suit and his favorite tie always tightens his spirit. He recalls wearing this very outfit for all 5 of his failed bar exams. A montage shows his past struggles, always facing them in the same attire. But looking at his reflection, he declares that this time will be different. Liliana watches him, asking what he means by that. Donatella looks on, her expression serious and intense. Yuga's face sets in a look of fierce determination as he adjusts his tie. The scene returns to the grand, imposing exterior of the royal courthouse. King Marius from his throne declares that the court will now reconvene. Donatella stands silently in the dock, Lord Gelvia visible in the gallery behind her. The king asks for final statements, and Yuga's arm shoots up as he shouts. He declares that he wishes to confirm the central point of the trial. Prosecutor Joan agrees the issue is the relative value, calling the conclusion obvious. Yuga smiles with sharp confidence, simply saying, "Okay." He then turns his attention to the throne, addressing the judge. No, the king himself. He looks up at the monarch, his expression serious, and states that he has a question. Though Joan objects, the king allows it, telling Yuga to proceed. The king looks down, surprised that the lawyer wishes to question him directly. Yuga begins his line of questioning, his voice steady. A sweeping vertical panel shows the vastness of the kingdom of Luano. Yuga's mouth is open as he poses his audacious, pivotal question. His words hang over the city. To you, your majesty, is this country valuable? The camera zooms in on the king's shocked, wide eyes. Liliana looks on, her own eyes wide with surprise at the lawyer's sheer nerve. Donatella watches from the side, her expression one of tense, hopeful anticipation. Lord Galvia is utterly flabbergasted, demanding to know what the man is saying. The king declares that Luano is everything. He would gladly give his life for it. Yuga, satisfied, follows up with a profound question. Then, what is a country? He explains that a country is not simply the territory depicted on a map, nor is it just the authority of its rulers, whose portraits line the palace halls. Yuga's hand points dramatically, recalling his old constitutional law lectures. A nation, he argues, is defined by its people. Without them, it ceases to exist. Therefore, he declares, the life of Sonia Campbell is equal to the nation itself. From the gallery, the pompous Lord Galvia listens with a grim, angry expression. Prosecutor Joan Wyson lets out a small, condescending chuckle, utterly unimpressed. He throws his head back and laughs, calling the argument completely ridiculous. He mockingly asks how many citizens it would take to equal one noble. Yuga fiercely demands to know where the king would draw such a line. Joan dismisses the question, stating there's no need to define such a thing. Yuga turns to the throne, demanding the king choose between a noble and his people. The king answers without hesitation that he would, of course, choose his people. He clarifies that the scales of justice currently hold only a single citizen's life. Joan realizes with a grimace that Yuga's absurd logic might actually work. He mutters that Yuga's foolish gambit was a shame, but it's over now. Yuga agrees with a confident smile, his masterfully crafted trap now set. He asks the king for permission to pose one final, crucial question. Donatella watches from the defendant's box, her eyes wide with anticipation. Yuga asks if the king would kill a friend or cut off his son's finger. The king is taken aback, asking what he means by such a grim question. Liliana interrupts, scolding Yuga for his blatant disrespect toward the monarch. Yuga shouts her down, insisting this is the job the king gave him. He glares at the throne, pressing the king for an answer to his dilemma. The king's eyes narrow in deep, troubled, and solemn contemplation. After a heavy silence, he admits that he cannot possibly make such a choice. Yuga asks why a friend, a stranger, shouldn't be chosen over one's own child. The king explains the immense value of life and the sacred need to continue his line. Yuga agrees with a knowing smile. Neither choice can be prioritized over the other. He tells a grim-faced Joan to reconsider the trial from this new perspective. He reminds the court that Lord Galvia's injury was minor, lasting only a week. He compares it to a scraped knee, a trivial wound that heals on its own. He contrasts the noble's insignificant injury with the invaluable life of a citizen. He stands before the king, asking him to choose between these two values. Yuga states the king's own conclusion back to him. You cannot choose. He directs the court to the law book, quoting the emergency evasion article. Joan's eyes widen as he reads the text, the implication finally dawning on him. Yuga declares that if neither can be prioritized, then emergency evasion is established. Liliana watches, a bead of sweat on her temple, stunned by his flawless logic. Lord Galvia looks on from the gallery, his face a mask of utter disbelief. Donatella watches the proceedings, her expression full of hope and astonishment. Joan panics, seeing the courtroom being completely swayed by Yuga's argument. He desperately objects, reminding everyone that the defendant is a half-elf. Yuga shouts that her race is irrelevant. The central point has been confirmed. He challenges his opponents to counter his point or be silent. Joan is left speechless, clutching his uniform, utterly and completely outmaneuvered. The king declares that all arguments have been heard and prepares his verdict. He reflects on the great deeds of Lord Galvia's ancestor, Theodora Galvia. He acknowledges the immense value and prestige of the historic Galvia house. But he also concedes that Yuga's right. Sonia Campbell is one of his people. He knows his nobles are growing resentful and that he must assert his authority. The king raises his hand, ready to give a gentle push to the scales of justice. He declares the new law a single thread of reason that he must uphold. He cannot choose, and therefore he must accept the validity of the evasion. The king's verdict rings out. The defendant, Donatella Bastianeri, is not guilty. Donatella looks on in absolute stunned silence, her mind unable to process the words. The gallery erupts in chaos, Lord Gelvia demanding to know what this means. Donatella turns to Yuga, calling out his name in a rush of overwhelming emotion. She shyly asks him how she can possibly thank him for saving her life. Yuga reassures her that he was simply doing his job as a lawyer. He admits he was so nervous he started crying, but he's glad he could help. Donatella insists that she cannot let his incredible deed go unthanked. Her face softens into a beautiful, grateful smile as she calls him her savior. Yuga is left speechless, blushing furiously at her sincere, heartfelt praise. Lord Gelvia slams his hand on the railing, shouting that this is ridiculous. He begs the king to reconsider, warning that this will affect his very rule. The king is resolute, stating his verdict will not change. The trial is absolute. Lord Gelvia stammers, but his protest cuts short by the king's finality. His eyes fill with rage as he declares that even if the king forgives her, he will personally take up arms and punish the elf himself. A guard in the crowd notes that Gelvia has been gathering private soldiers. Donatella confirms this, adding that he's been preparing weapons for a purpose. Yuga cites the new law, Article 128, the crime of preparing for insurrection. The king, looking at his law book, exclaims in surprise at the new crime. Lord Gelvia looks on, a bead of sweat on his brow, realizing his grave mistake. Yuga declares that the right to hire a lawyer belongs to everyone. He continues, stating that this right applies no matter how arrogant one is. Lord Gelvia, enraged, sputters at the insult to his noble status. Yuga feigns confusion, asking what he meant by his arrogant tone. He gives a final, smug, and utterly triumphant smile. A montage shows his journey, born in Japan, now a lawyer in Luano. He declares himself the lawyer of the heretical law, concluding the chapter. The next chapter opens, recapping his identity as Shiba Yuga, a 5-time failure. It recalls how a god brought him to the fantasy world of Luano. His dream of being a lawyer, impossible in Japan, came true in this world. He has resolved to live as the lawyer of the Red Law. Yuga's eyes fly open in a sudden panicked awakening. He sits up in a luxurious, unfamiliar bed, pulling back the covers. Clutching his head, he realizes with a sweat that it wasn't a dream. He gets out of bed, his feet finding his folded clothes on the floor. He stretches, recalling his confrontation with God and witnessing magic. Peeking from his room, he sees a gleaming knife and remembers his first case. It's Donatella, the half-elf girl he acquitted, wishing him good morning. He greets her back awkwardly as she tells him breakfast is almost ready. He wonders with a tired sigh just how his life ended up like this. A sliver of his eye shows his weary resignation to his new circumstances. A flashback shows the verdict. Donatella Bastianeri is not guilty. Donatella, overcome with tears of joy, asks how she can ever repay him. She thanks him, still not believing she's free when she expected to die. Yuga dismisses her thanks, waving a casual, reassuring hand. He tells her that her beautiful smile is more than enough thanks for him. He internally celebrates having finally used the cheesy line he always wanted to. Flustered after the trial, Yuga awkwardly tries to thank Donatella for her help. She gravely informs him that for elves, a debt must be repaid in double. This, she explains, is a deeply held and serious custom among her people. It is a cultural rule that all elves are honor-bound to follow. Yuga realizes his joke was taken seriously, lamenting he can't repay his life. With sincere eyes, Donatella then asks if she can become his assistant. Completely caught off guard, Yuga can only manage a sound of pure shock. Liliana smiles, approving the arrangement as helpful for Donatella's new life. Later, Yuga looks completely bewildered by his sudden and strange new housemate. He finds Donatella in the kitchen, already wearing an apron over her clothes. She looks up at him, a silent, "Hey!" hanging in the air between them. Yuga objects, saying that she doesn't have to live with him to help. She wonders why, since the king provided this large house for them both. He insists that it is a problem for a young man and woman to cohabitate. Donatella reasons that living together is simply the most efficient way to serve him. She sees no issue with the arrangement, asking what the problem could be. Exasperated, Yuga decides to ask a direct and hopefully dissuading question. She calmly replies that she will be 14, much to Yuga's utter shock. He gestures to her mature form, and she notes her chest is rather flat. She explains that elves mature quickly but age slowly, a useful survival trait. He reels internally, unable to process that she is only 14 years old. He feels uneasy having a 14-year-old as his assistant, stealing her youth. She considers it a great honor, but he suspects it's just the king's convenience. More than anything, she is overjoyed to be able to help her savior. Her genuine, heartfelt gratitude leaves him completely flustered and speechless. He waves his hands dismissively, insisting that she is not a bother at all. He notes she's half his age as she announces that breakfast is now ready. She presents a grotesque meal, admitting it might be a bit heavy for morning. Yuga can only stare in abject horror at the culinary disaster before him. He thinks it looks less like cooking and more like corpse desecration. She admits she got carried away, as it was her first task as his assistant. As he forces a bite, she innocently asks if the taste is to his liking. The flavor seems to induce a state of profound, electrifying, silent shock. Later, they walk through the bustling streets of a festive town market. Donatella looks sullen, still upset about her disastrous cooking attempt. Yuga tries to console her, telling her not to be so down about it. She apologizes, clarifying that her frustration is not directed toward him. She feels useless, unable to perform even the simple task of cooking a meal. Suddenly, a small hooded figure bumps hard into Yuga in the crowd. The figure offers a quick, casual apology before darting away into the chaos. Immediately, 2 city guards appear, shouting for him to seize the running girl. One of the guards curses, frustrated that the infamous thief has escaped again. He asks Yuga where the notorious young thief, Littlefoot, has gone. Another person in the crowd confirms that the girl is a well-known thief. The word thief triggers a sudden, dawning horror in Yuga's mind. A cold dread washes over him as he instinctively touches his neck. He lets out a cry of pure alarm, startling Donatella and the nearby crowd. He frantically tells Donatella that his precious necktie has been stolen. The crowd spots the hooded thief disappearing down the crowded street. A guard points after her, shouting that she is getting away from them. As the guards give chase, a distraught Yuga follows, desperate for his tie. Donatella observes that without his tie, he loses all his fighting spirit. She reassures him, determined to prove her worth by helping him now. She begins a dark incantation, calling forth an eternal, silent sleep. Yuga looks back, horrified by her choice of spell, telling her to wait. Her gloved hand glows with dark power as she continues the powerful spell. With a glowing magic circle at her feet, she casts Necromantic Revival. The crowd reacts with shock and awe at the sudden display of magic. He questions her choice to use such conspicuous magic in a public place. Donatella turns to him, her gaze intense, telling him simply to watch. Far down the street, the thief Marte runs, confident in her escape. She holds up the stolen tie like a trophy, certain she has gotten away. With a confident smirk, she scoffs at how slow-witted humans are. She sees the guards far behind her, wondering if she is simply too fast. Suddenly, a strange sound from below makes her pause in confusion. A massive skeletal ribcage erupts from the ground, trapping her completely. She lets out a scream of pure, unadulterated terror at the sight. Trapped within the bones, she cries out, asking what this thing is. Back with Yuga, his stolen necktie lies on the cobblestones at his feet. Overjoyed, he picks it up, crying out, "My necktie!" in relief. He thanks Donatella profusely, amazed at her magic. She is glad to help. Donatella looks on, simply stating that she appreciates his cooperation. The guards secure Marta, admitting they couldn't have caught her on their own. Marte defiantly shouts that the man is her parent, questioning his duty. A guard dismisses her claims while Yuga notes her use of parent. The guard clarifies they are adoptive parents, and the tie has been severed. Baron Kinghall appears, the wealthy merchant who adopted Marte and other orphans. Marte sneers, telling him not to speak like he's some great philanthropist. She accuses him of adopting orphans only to create loyal, broken servants. A flashback shows children being brutally beaten for any sign of defiance. The orphans were forced to spy on each other, earning rewards for snitching. Kinghall proudly calls these broken children his most reliable servants. Yuga is horrified by the story, calling the situation cruel and twisted. The guard admits the discipline was harsh, but says she owes him a debt. Marte scoffs at the idea of gratitude, telling the ignorant man to be quiet. She declares that there will always be rebels like her who resist brainwashing. Her eyes burn with an unyielding, defiant fire that will not be extinguished. She turns to Yuga, asking what he thinks happens to the dropouts. With a dark grin, she reveals they are sold to human traffickers. Marte reveals her brand, saying she doesn't even know how much she was sold for. She strains against her bonds, declaring her crime was justified revenge. A guard dismisses her claims of human trafficking as utterly ridiculous. A citizen insists the Baron is too respected to commit such a heinous crime. The guards look at each other, clearly conflicted and unsure how to proceed. Marte challenges them, asking if they are too afraid of the noble's power. The guard looks away, insisting that regardless of her story, theft is theft. They decide to take her to the station, telling Yuga to wait for them. Yuga steps forward, his expression serious, and asks them what they're doing. He turns to the defiant Marte, telling her there is something he needs to say. He adjusts his lucky tie, his mind already preparing for another legal battle. Yuga confidently assures the young thief, Marte, that she will not be punished. The city guards and Donatella stare at him, completely baffled by his declaration. The senior guard questions Yuga's sympathy, stating he has multiple reliable eyewitnesses. He firmly declares that Marty Kingle is, without a doubt, a thief. Yuga asks if they are aware Luano now uses Japanese law, which the guard confirms. His partner complains about carrying the heavy law book, assuming theft is theft. With a cunning smirk, Yuga says this will make things quick. He explains that under Japanese law, parental ties cannot be so easily severed. The guards look at each other, utterly confused by this legal argument. Yuga cites the civil code, which requires a family court's permission for disinheritance. The freckle-faced guard frantically checks the book, confirming the law is real. Yuga states that legally, Marte and the Baron are still parent and child. The guard protests, but Yuga quotes a maxim: the law does not enter the home. He explains that family matters are the responsibility of the parents to resolve. Yuga presents his final decisive point, citing Penal Code Article 244, Section 1. He declares that due to a special provision for relatives, she cannot be punished. The senior guard is astonished that such a strange law actually exists. Yuga concedes that the stolen items must still be returned in a civil matter. The freckle-faced guard suddenly interjects, telling Yuga to wait a moment. He asks Yuga if the girl hadn't just stolen his own necktie. Yuga feigns surprise, touching the distinctive heart-patterned tie at his collar. He smoothly places the tie around Marty's neck, claiming she simply dropped it. Mart looks up at him, her defiant expression replaced by stunned silence. Yuga offers to act as her defense attorney should the case go to trial. The guards are taken aback, realizing who he must be. The crowd recognizes him as the famous God-chosen lawyer, Shiba Yuga. The senior guard concedes that while the punishment is exempt, the crime stands. Yuga is flustered by his grandiose title, muttering about how ridiculous it sounds. The guard formally asks him to come to the station for questioning. When the guards turn back to their prisoner, they find only an empty rope. They panic, shouting that she has vanished into thin air. Yuga is also shocked by her sudden and complete disappearance. The guards realize with frustration that they have been tricked and she has escaped. One asks what they should do now, and his partner sighs in resignation. They decide to report it as is. Yuga asks Donatella if it's his fault. Later, Donatella asks Yuga if he was truly okay with the outcome. She asks if his necktie wasn't an important item to him. He laughs it off, saying she is just trying to make him look cool. She smiles gently, observing that his body moved on instinct to protect it. Yuga muses that he only got his tie back before stopping in his tracks. He catches a fleeting glimpse of Marty bumping into him in the crowd. Donatella, seeing his sudden halt, asks him what is wrong. Yuga's eye widens as he puts the pieces together. He lets out a gasp, a look of pure shock on his face. He tells Donatella that the girl who just bumped into him was Marty. He realizes she came back specifically to return his tie with a gift. Marty is seen slipping away into the crowd with a sly smile. Yuga looks down to see a heavy, gleaming gold ingot with his necktie. The scene transitions to the grand and imposing royal castle of Luano. Princess Vivienne summarizes that 2 criminals are free thanks to the lawyer. Prosecutor Joan and another nobleman stand before her, awaiting her judgment. Joan confirms that her summary of the situation is correct. The princess hums thoughtfully, her fan hiding her expression. She declares that the lawyer is a nuisance to her vision for the country. A new chapter begins, showing a dark and foreboding mansion at night. Inside, a man lies dead on a bed, another man standing over him. The standing man has a bead of sweat on his face, looking down in shock. His eye is wide with a mixture of terror and disbelief at the scene. His gloved hands tremble as he looks at the body before him. He whispers to himself in horror that he has done it. He clutches his chest, questioning his actions before steeling his resolve. He convinces himself that his horrific deed was an act of justice. Holding a flower pin, he vows it's for Luano as he completes his plan. The next morning, Yuga is shown, seemingly waiting for a trial. The grand residence where Yuga now lives is shown from the outside. Yuga sits up in bed, rubbing his eyes as he realizes it's morning. He stumbles out of his room, complaining that his throat is parched. He groans, calling out for a glass of water. He accidentally walks in on Donatella, who is changing in her undergarments. He freezes mid-stride, his face a mask of pure, utter shock. He stammers, trying to explain that his intrusion was not intentional. Donatella, teary-eyed, explains she was sleepy after working all night. Overwhelmed, Yuga blasts a hole in the wall, screaming for her to get out. Liliana arrives moments later to find the ruined doorway. She asks if that's all, calling the entire situation ridiculous and childish. She scolds Donatella for using offensive magic. Donatella meekly apologizes. The massive smoking hole in the wall is a testament to the magic's power. Liliana warns Yuga to stop peeking if he wants to live. Donatella apologizes, explaining it's her first time living with a non-family member. She admits men have desires. Yuga insists he was completely at fault. Yuga looks at the damage, realizing how incredibly powerful magic is. Liliana scoffs, telling him he truly lacks common sense about this world. She explains that only a select few with a special talent can use magic. Yuga asks in surprise if Donatella is really that amazing. Liliana confirms her skill is a sign of her strong elven bloodline. She declares that Donatella is, without question, a true genius. Yuga praises his talented assistant, much to Donatella's blushing embarrassment. Donatella offers Liliana tea, who declines, saying she has no time to rest. Liliana urgently announces that a royal command has decided Yuga's next case. She says the trial is tomorrow, and he must meet the defendant immediately. They arrive at the prison, a large and imposing stone building. Yuga asks Liliana what she knows. She says it's part of her duty. She explains that she has heard rumors from the castle staff. She reveals the defendant is Renette Gelvia, which shocks Yuga. Liliana confirms that he heard her correctly. She clarifies that it is the son of the nobleman from Donatella's first trial. A montage shows the arrogant, mustachioed face of Lord Gelvia. Liliana states gravely that the charge against Renette is murder. She notes that it is highly unusual for a noble to be accused of a crime, and with the charge being murder, the entire royal castle is in an uproar. As they walk, the royal guard knight Liliana delivers a grim warning to Yuga. Donatella and Liliana flank Yuga, who seems lost in thought. Liliana states plainly that he too will be the target of resentment. Yuga smirks, resolving to show no weakness and proceed with extreme caution. They arrive at the imposing, heavily barred gates of the royal prison. Inside, a young man with wavy hair shouts, vehemently proclaiming his innocence. He kicks his foot through the bars, demanding his immediate release. Yuga sizes up his arrogant new client, the accused murderer, Renette Gelvia. He calmly begins the interview, stating he will review the case's facts. The victim is identified as Kara Velksman, the young widow of a landowner. She had been living a quiet and solitary life in her country mansion. A servant discovered her lifeless body in the mansion's bedroom. Yuga confirms that a servant witnessed Renette leaving the scene. Renette states that his alibi begins from that crucial moment. He explains that he was out hunting with his brother Rudiger that day. As dusk fell, he became separated and was wandering through the area. He was about to leave when he believes a servant spotted him. The scene shows the servant noticing his suspicious presence from a window. Renette concludes by insisting he has never even met the victim. Donatella skeptically asks if that is the entirety of his story. She bluntly tells him that his explanation is hardly a believable alibi. She suggests that he should really try to think of a better excuse. Renette explodes with rage, insulted that a long-eared elf dares question him. Yuga panics, trying to shush Donatella before she further angers the nobleman. He quickly interjects, explaining that she is merely his assistant. Renette scoffs at the idea, finding an elf assistant to be utterly ridiculous. He sneers that she must be Yuga's sex slave, not a professional. Yuga seethes, knowing that an angry Donatella is a dangerous Donatella. Donatella, however, seems genuinely confused by the term sex slave. Yuga tries to steer the conversation back, asking for more details. He asks Renette to confirm one thing: he did not enter the mansion. Yuga muses that without footprints, there would be no evidence. Renette falls into a tense, suspicious silence at the question. He suddenly snaps, shouting at Yuga that it doesn't matter. Yuga is stunned into silence by his client's bizarre outburst. Renette furiously accuses his own lawyer of doubting his innocence. Yuga tries to explain that the questions are necessary for the defense. "I've had enough," Renette shouts, turning his back. "I'm going to rest." As they exit the cell block, Yuga is completely dejected. Liliana is waiting for them and asks if their meeting is over. Yuga frantically tells her he couldn't get a proper story from him. He begs her to let him back in, calling her by the wrong name. Liliana lets out a deep, weary sigh at his panicked incompetence. She sternly reminds him that she had warned him to be careful. Yuga collapses in frustration, overwhelmed by his difficult client. He glares back towards the cell, unable to make sense of the man. A polite voice interrupts, asking if he is the esteemed Lord Shibayudo. A handsome young nobleman introduces himself with a disarming smile. It is Rudiger Gelvia, who thanks Yuga for defending his brother. Liliana is surprised to see him, wondering why he isn't at his duties. Yuga is startled as the polite young man takes both of his hands. Rudiger explains that his brother, while ill-mannered, is good at heart. He earnestly pleads with Yuga to somehow get his brother a lighter sentence. A flustered Yuga can only stammer that he will do his very best. As Rudiger departs, Liliana remarks on how different the two brothers are. Yuga agrees that they are complete opposites, which Liliana finds unusual. She clarifies, one is an incompetent older brother, the other an excellent younger one. Reinette is a delinquent who skips school to gamble with street thugs. Rudiger, in contrast, is a model student with top marks and a sterling reputation. Liliana explains the Gelvia clan is powerful, and many worry about Reinette's succession. Her duty now complete, Liliana prepares to leave Yuga to his case. Yuga quickly stops her, stating that he has a favor to ask. Liliana turns back, her expression questioning, intrigued by his request. The scene shifts to a vast, sprawling forest under an overcast sky. A lone carriage makes its way down a deserted country road. Inside, Yuga looks out the window, remarking on the mansion's remote location. He notes that it's a place one could only reach by horseback. Donatella watches him intently, asking if he has a plan. She correctly deduces he wants to see the crime scene, believing Reinette is innocent. Yuga admits that, based on his attitude, Reinette doesn't seem like a killer. Donatella presses him, asking if he came all this way with a strategy. He shouts that he has no such plan, but then trails off. He declares his core principle. As a lawyer, he must believe his client's innocence. He hopes to find some kind of clue at the Velksman estate ahead. Donatella points out the solitary mansion, identifying it as their destination. Yuga steps out of the carriage, calling out tentatively toward the house. An elderly maid appears, asking if they are with the military investigation. With a weary expression, she introduces herself as a servant of the house. She leads them inside to a parlor, welcoming the master lawyer. Yuga asks why she would welcome the lawyer for her mistress's killer. The maid replies that she doesn't mind, a curiously passive response. She explains the house's tragic fate, as it will soon be taken over. Yuga asks if she would recount the events of the day of the murder. She agrees, though she has already told the military the story many times. She begins by explaining she was asleep in a small outbuilding on the property. A horse's loud neighing suddenly startled her from her sleep. She wondered if someone had gotten lost on the road so late at night. Wrapping a shawl around herself, she went outside to investigate. Peeking from behind the main gate, she saw someone at the front door. A man was leaving the mansion, his horse waiting patiently by a lamp. She clearly identified the man as Lord Reinette Gelvia. She watched from her hiding spot as he mounted his horse and rode off. She let out a sigh of relief, thinking nothing more of it. She then proceeded into the main house to check on her mistress. She called out her mistress's name, but received no answer. Upon entering the bedroom, she discovered her mistress was already dead. Alone and unable to summon the military, she simply waited until morning. Donatella interjects, asking her to wait for a moment. She asked the maid to confirm that Reinette had already left the mansion. The maid affirms that this is correct, her testimony unwavering. Yuga's eyes narrow in profile, certain the mansion holds the key. Donatella agrees while Yuga groans, feeling the weight of the case. He politely asks the headmaid if he may see the crime scene. Of course, she says, leading them into the quiet, stately mansion. Yuga stands in the room, realizing this is where a person died. He clasps his hands in silent thought. Donatella watches, confused. Donatella inspects a wardrobe, noting the guards took even the clothes. Yuga asks the maid if she knows what, if anything, was stolen. As far as I know, she confirms, no valuables were taken. Donatella stands by the bed, pondering the strangeness of it all. She concludes that the more she investigates, the more it seems hopeless. With no valuables stolen, she is forced to rule out robbery. The elderly victim likely lacked the strength to fight back, she thinks. Reinette's alibi of being lost with his brother seems very weak. She concludes Reinette must be the killer, but Yuga has a sudden idea. He isn't listening to her, his focus drawn elsewhere in the room. He turns and asks the headmaid a peculiar question about Miss Kara. He wonders aloud if it's possible she didn't own a hand mirror. Oh my, the maid gasps. I was helping her with it this morning. Donatella asks what's wrong, seeing the spark of realization in his eyes. Something is missing from this mansion, Yuga declares with certainty. He believes this missing object will be the very key to his defense. Donatella remains confused by his strange and sudden line of questioning. The day of the trial arrives at the Grand Castle of Luano. The courtroom is packed, with King Marius and a woman presiding. Yuga looks on, thinking it's the handsome assistant's first battle. Prosecutor Joan Wyson stands ready, his expression cold and assured. The gallery murmurs as they notice a beautiful woman has arrived. A decorative detail of the courtroom's architecture is shown. High on his throne, King Marius prepares to begin the proceedings. Princess Vivienne remarks how rare it is for her father to attend. The king announces that his daughter is attending by her own request. The princess tells everyone to do their best and fulfill their duties. A noble points out the famous God-chosen lawyer, Sheba Court. The princess settles in her seat, ready to observe the trial. "Let the court be in session," she says, her gaze sharp and assessing. In a dark alley, a gloved hand offers a flower emblem pin. Rudiger Gelvia looks at the cloaked figure, asking what it is. The figure explains it is proof of joining their cause, to be always carried. Their actions, the figure says, are for the prosperity of Luano. Rudiger holds the pin, his face set with resolve to complete his mission. In the present, Prosecutor Joan concludes his opening statement. It is clear, he states, that Reinette Gelvia murdered Kara Velksman. He notes that the defendant shows absolutely no signs of remorse. He looks to the king and princess, preparing to make his demand. Citing Penal Code 199, he formally requests the death penalty. The gallery gasps in shock at the severity of the requested sentence. "The death penalty?" Reinette screams, "That's a ridiculous joke." Yuga feels the weight of the moment. Reinette's life is on the line. Reinette insists he is innocent and that the death penalty is absurd. He rants that the case rests on the testimony of one old woman. The gallery scoffs, wondering how anyone could trust such a person. Joan coolly states that Reinette claims to have never met the victim. He turns to the king and formally requests to call a witness. Rudiger Gelvia, the defendant's brother, strides to the witness stand. Reinette and Donatella stare, their faces masks of utter shock. "Rudiger," Reinette stammers, "why are you here?" Rudiger tells his brother he must not forget his honor as a Gelvia. He urges Reinette to confess, even if it hurts their family's name. Addressing the king, Rudiger begins to tell the court what he saw. His testimony flashes back to the day of the hunt in the forest. Reinette had asked about the beautiful Velksman widow living nearby. Rudiger recalls thinking she was married to a much younger man. He mused that it was a waste for her to live in seclusion. The sky is shown as their conversation continues in the woods. Later, a lost Reinette calls out for his brother in the dense woods. He is surprised to spot the Velksman mansion through the trees. A look of concern crosses his face as he approaches the estate. From horseback, he sees his brother on the porch and calls his name. A servant hidden nearby sees him and thinks, "I'm being watched." Reinette thinks it's late, but it should be fine if no trouble arises. Rudiger testifies his brother left before he learned of the murder. He declares that he saw his brother leave the mansion with his own eyes. He bows and Prosecutor Joan thanks him for his powerful testimony. Joan smirks, noting this is the testimony of a respected nobleman. Reinette grunts in frustration, his alibi completely destroyed. Joan asks if the defense has any cross-examination for Rudiger. Reinette turns to Yuga, begging him to use any trick he has. He screams at his lawyer to overturn the testimony and prove his innocence. The gallery sneers, certain that his desperate outburst proves his guilt. Yuga looks at his client, calmly asking if he is truly serious. "Of course I am," Reinette shouts. "Now get on with it!" Yuga asks if he is truly okay with using any means necessary. Donatella watches the tense exchange, her expression filled with worry. Joan Wyson observes the defense, a cold, calculating look in his eye. Reinette agrees, telling Yuga to hurry up and get him acquitted. Yuga says if he's that resolved, then everything will be fine. He tightens his lucky heart-patterned tie, stealing his resolve. A confident smile spreads across his face as he declares he can win. Rudiger watches from the stand as Yuga makes his bold claim. Donatella, surprised, asks Yuga if he really thinks they can win. After the trial, Yuga asks to speak with Rudiger, who agrees. He explains that he visited the vast and deep forest himself. He asks if Rudiger truly just happened to see someone there. Rudiger smiles, saying he thought Yuga might ask him that. He admits he knew of Kara and her womanizing brother beforehand. He was heading to the same place and saw his brother arrive first. Donatella listens, admitting that his story isn't that strange. Reinette was seen leaving, so Rudiger's testimony seems to hold up. Rudiger calmly asks Donatella if he said a single untrue thing. Reinette grits his teeth, his face contorted in a desperate denial. He clenches his fist, insisting he is not a murderer. He wildly accuses his brother Rudiger of framing him for the inheritance. Rudiger looks on with a sad certainty, believing this is for the best. Yuga steps in, telling a shocked Reinette to calm himself down. He stands, declaring that his client's claim is entirely plausible. Yuga states the possibility that Reinette was framed cannot be dismissed. Prosecutor Joan scoffs, finding the defense's claim impertinent and baseless. Joan mockingly asks if they are accusing the noble Rudiger himself. Yuga simply smiles, stating he is only doing his job. Joan accuses him of trying to obscure the facts without evidence. Joan decides to present his own evidence, surprising Donatella. He confidently announces he has decisive, physical evidence to present now. Yuga watches the proceedings with a sharp, focused gaze. The prosecutor orders a guard to bring in the key evidence. Joan explains they searched the defendant's residence within the capital. There, hidden in a storeroom, they discovered a crucial item. An officer presents a tray holding a woman's bra and panties. The gallery murmurs in confusion, wondering about the strange evidence. They question what women's underwear has to do with a murder trial. Joan declares this is the evidence that will decide the trial's outcome. He reveals the undergarments belong to the victim, Kara Velksman. Renette's face contorts in shock as he hears the victim's name. Joan questions why the victim's belongings were found in Renette's home. He posits that Renette took it as a gruesome trophy of his crime. The crowd reacts with shock and disgust at the prosecutor's theory. Cornered and broken, Renette clutches his head, unable to offer a defense. Donatella watches Renette's breakdown, utterly bewildered by the situation. She realizes this damning evidence proves Renette entered the mansion. She tells Yuga they can no longer defend him, but he agrees calmly. To her surprise, Yuga smiles, declaring that they have just won. Yuga stands and directly addresses the stunned prosecutor with a question. He asks if the prosecutor's search of the home was thorough. He then asks a simple question: wasn't there more to find? Yuga specifies he means more underwear, confusing Joan even further. Joan confirms they found 16 more sets, all belonging to the victim. Donatella worries that this only strengthens the prosecution's case. Yuga raises a finger, preparing to ask one more crucial question. He asks if they found underwear that didn't belong to the victim. Joan confirms a total of 211 pieces, sending the crowd into an uproar. Yuga demands to know why, telling the prosecutor to stop feigning ignorance. He repeats the prosecution's theory about the underwear being a trophy. He points out that 211 pieces clearly belong to many people. Joan wonders aloud if Renette is an incompetent serial killer. Yuga shouts that the murder and the underwear are totally unrelated. The underwear itself was the true target of the crime. He declares Renette broke in not to kill, but to steal underwear. The gallery is left utterly speechless by this bizarre revelation. The shocking accusation hangs heavy in the silent courtroom. The prosecutor is completely flabbergasted, his case in shambles. Yuga proclaims that his client is simply an underwear thief. The crowd murmurs in disbelief, trying to process the strange crime. Joan and Donatella question the logic of stealing something so worthless. Yuga realizes the common sense of his world doesn't apply here. He adjusts his tie, preparing to educate the clueless prosecutor. He explains the concept of a fetish to the bewildered courtroom. Renette shouts at Yuga, inadvertently confirming the existence of such people. Yuga explains to Donatella that the items must be used. A woman in the gallery expresses her disgust at the concept. The crowd struggles to comprehend a nobleman having such a fetish. Renette, blushing furiously, mutters that it just makes him a pervert. He frantically denies the accusation when Donatella looks at him. Yuga pressures his client to confess, acknowledging his noble pride. He lays out the legal stakes, comparing murder to simple theft. He presents Renette with a stark choice: his life or his pride. Renette begins to cry, overwhelmed by the impossible choice before him. Joan coldly asks if he wants to die for nothing over underwear. Renette whispers his broken admission, conceding the point. Yuga demands that he speak up so the entire court can hear. Renette struggles, clenching his fists in a final moment of resistance. He finally shouts his confession for the entire courtroom to hear. A judge asks for more specific details about his preferences. Blushing, Renette admits he prefers underwear owned by beautiful women. Yuga grins, confirming he stole them on the day of the murder. He explains he couldn't resist after hearing about the beautiful widow. The gallery reacts with a mix of disgust and morbid fascination. Yuga marvels that the prideful nobleman would admit his fetish publicly. Yuga explains Renette's shame is why he hid the stolen items. Yuga demands he speak louder, declaring he has ruined everything. Yuga asks Renette to confirm that he was the one responsible. From her box, Princess Vivienne watches the bizarre scene unfold. She notes that Renette has now explained his presence at the scene. The king declares that all others at the scene are now suspects. The princess turns her sharp gaze on the one who was watching. She challenges Rudiger directly, demanding he offer a rebuttal. Rudiger begins to panic, pleading for them to wait a moment. He clutches his pin, insisting his actions were for the country. His eyes widen in pure terror as he realizes he is trapped. The princess smiles coldly as Rudiger looks up in horror. He begins to question if the princess herself is behind this. An impossibly cold power radiates from the princess's eye. A silent, invisible force seems to strike out at the witness. Yuga and Donatella sense a shift in the courtroom's atmosphere. Rudiger suddenly gasps, clutching at his chest in agony. The princess's gaze remains fixed on him, cold and unyielding. He lets out a choked cry as he begins to collapse. Reinette cries out his brother's name in alarm and confusion. Rudiger's eyes roll back as he loses consciousness completely. He tumbles from the witness stand, crashing onto the courtroom floor. The king shouts for a doctor as chaos erupts in the court. Reinette Gelvia looks on from the witness stand, utterly confused by the sudden turn. His brother Rudiger suddenly collapses forward, slumping over the wooden witness box. A small white, pill-like object rolls silently across the checkered courtroom floor. In a grand room, a retainer reports the trial's outcome to Princess Vivienne. He informs her that Rudiger Gelvia has conveniently lost all memory of the incident. Vivienne muses that the fool should have been killed perfectly, if at all. The retainer asks if she is pleased, and she confirms it with a nod. Ashamed, Reinette wonders how he can face the world after his humiliating confession. The princess's retainer appears, delivering a chilling warning to Yuga from his mistress. Yuga simply offers a defiant smirk, silently accepting the dangerous political challenge. From her balcony, Princess Vivienne wonders how she should deal with this new pawn. Yuga tries to cheer Reinette, stating his own creed is to kill his enemies. In a comical aside, Chibi Yuga laments his stressful courtroom debut. He wonders aloud about the nature of the complete book of Luano law. He speculates that it must just be a translated version of Japan's 6 codes. Liliana explains it is a special edition from God, written entirely in Japanese. Yuga is unimpressed as he flips through the pages of dense, familiar text. The God Girl confirms it is a normal law book with no special treatment. The scene dissolves into a cosmic void, opening a new, colorful chapter. Yuga floats in a sea of stars, his lucky tie now a headband. He sits up in the strange void, completely disoriented and confused by his surroundings. He clutches his throbbing head, trying to recall the events after the party. With a start, he realizes he is in a very strange and unfamiliar place. The cheerful, smiling face of the God Girl suddenly appears directly before him. She gets extremely close, giving him an enthusiastic thumbs up for his hard work. Yuga recoils in surprise, startled by her sudden and very intense proximity. After recovering his composure, he tiredly asks her what business she wants with him. She cheerfully waves her hands, explaining she has no particular reason for visiting. Yuga is visibly annoyed that she has nothing important to say to him. She explains she just wanted to see for herself how well he was doing. She recalls his victory, flashing back to Reinette's shocked face in the courtroom. She praises his success in winning acquittals in 2 very difficult cases. She also commends him for saving Donatella from an unjust and false arrest. The God Girl also remembers how he saved the young thief, Marty, as well. She declares his performance as a lawyer a resounding success and calls him master. Flustered, Yuga tells her not to get cocky, though he seems pleased. She sternly warns him to always remember Luano's customs are different from his. He grimaces, vividly recalling the hostile, prejudiced gallery from his first trial. He reassures her he'll manage, but her expression shows she is still doubtful. Waving goodbye, she announces that she is busy and must be on her way. She explains she must now go and give a quest to a hero's party. Before an intrigued Yuga can ask about the heroes, she begins to depart. A brilliant flash of white light completely envelops him, ending the strange dream. The light fades away, returning him from the cosmic void back to reality. His eyes snap open with a start as he awakens with a sudden jolt. He sits up in his luxurious bed, dismissing the bizarre encounter as just a dream. He then mutters to himself that it probably wasn't a dream after all. He reasons that a god appearing at his bedside is just another strange occurrence. Donatella proudly enters, presenting him with a perfect, glistening white pudding. The dessert wobbles slightly, a testament to her newfound and impressive culinary skill. She holds up a saucer, presenting her successful and delicious creation with a smile. She announces happily that she has made a very good pudding for him. With a warm smile, she wishes him a good morning and offers the dish. Yuga, looking pale and unwell, manages only a weak and strained greeting in return. Donatella's smile fades as she notes his terrible complexion and asks what's wrong. She asks if he is all right, holding a platter of freshly made food. She begins to scold him for drinking with Reinette, who is still a minor. The reminder makes Yuga clutch his head as a fresh wave of nausea hits. He groans, asking if she can use healing magic, but she sadly cannot. She mischievously offers to cure him by draining his life force with necromancy. She suggests they go into town to buy some medicine after they eat. Yuga worries about the cost, since he does not have any health insurance. He then remembers the generous reward money he received from the king's coffers. Donatella reassures him that 1 UN will be more than enough to pay. In an aside, the god girl explains the generous exchange rate to the reader. Donatella announces that she has prepared breakfast and insists that he must eat. A silver cloche sits on the dining table, hiding her latest culinary creation. She wheels a serving cart over, declaring she is very confident in today's meal. She places a hand on her chest, proudly stating her skill at grilling meat. She lifts the lid to reveal a slab of meat boiling in a liquid. Yuga stares at the bizarre, bubbling dish, his face a mask of pure horror. He points a finger, asking what it's boiling in. She says it's sauce. They walk down a quaint cobblestone street lined with timber-framed buildings. Donatella tells a still queasy Yuga about a well-regarded shop that is nearby. She explains the shop sells medicine and also repairs various kinds of machinery. Yuga mutters that right now, the only thing he cares about is medicine. They arrive at a building with a gear-laden sign that reads, Yorozuya. Donatella cautiously pushes open the heavy wooden door, peering inside the shop. She calls out a polite greeting into the cluttered and dimly lit interior. She asks if anyone is home, as Yuga observes the shop's chaotic atmosphere. A small figure wearing large goggles suddenly pops up from behind a wooden counter. A young girl in a lab coat pushes up her goggles and asks their business. Yuga wonders if this energetic young girl is actually the one in charge here. He is left completely speechless, taken aback by her abrupt and direct manner. She looks at him with a dismissive smirk, telling him not to underestimate her. She proudly boasts that she graduated from the Royal University at only 14. She strikes a dramatic pose, eager to list her many impressive academic qualifications. She explains the necessity of learning many fields in this complex modern era. She lists her studies, from medicine and engineering to magic and literary arts. She explains that eventually, people started calling her by a very specific title. She turns dramatically, her back to them, as her long twin tails whip around. She declares herself the omnipotent one, the genius inventor known as Griselda. Yuga stammers an apology as Donatella claps, amused by the girl's grand performance. Griselda smiles, pleased with their reaction, before asking again what they came for. She stands on a stool, arms outstretched, declaring she can make anything. She invites them to state their request, telling them to ask for anything. Yuga, looking absolutely miserable, clutches his mouth, trying not to be sick. He meekly asks for some hangover medicine, explaining that he is at his limit. He waits in agony as Griselda turns to her workbench to prepare the cure. She places a gloved hand on a neatly prepared package on her desk. With his hangover cured, Griselda informs Yuga the price is 2,000 yen. She senses his lingering presence and asks if he is angry with her. Yuga, touching his neck, denies it, simply impressed by her amazing skill. She passionately declares her sacred oath to heal any sick person before her. Yuga is deeply moved, calling her amazing. Donatella agrees she's impressive for a child. Griselda sternly warns him to always follow the correct dosage for any medicine. A new customer arrives and she tells Yuga to leave if his business is done. A slick gangster enters, asking if a woman named Griselda is here. Yuga instinctively recognizes the man's classic low-level gangster appearance. Griselda confirms her identity from behind the counter, asking what he wants. The man smirks, revealing he is an envoy from the notorious Baron Kinghall. Yuga's eyes widen, recalling the depraved human trafficker from a previous case. The gangster gets in Griselda's face, demanding the new drug he commissioned. She admits the strict deadline is difficult, as he hadn't contacted her. He looms over her, asking if she dares to suggest that she failed. She defiantly tells him not to mess with her. The drug is right here. However, her defiance grows as she refuses to hand it over. He explains the drug's effects. It heightens focus while removing pain and fear. While it has severe side effects, he argues it could save many patients. Yuga realizes this is a combat drug, questioning if Kinghall plans to sell it. Griselda admits that when she accepted the commission, she was a naive child. A flashback reveals a masked Kinghall, whom she didn't know was an arms dealer. The memory shows his silhouette against a field, a symbol of his power. The imagery suggests he intends to sell her creation as a tool of war. Griselda declares she won't let her medicine be used for such a purpose. The envoy condescendingly tells her to come back when she understands the world. Donatella grimly recalls that there is nothing more wretched than losing a war. She believes one must do anything to win, but her thought trails off. Yuga is overcome with emotion, moved to tears by Griselda's noble ideals. He sobs loudly that using such a drug for war is simply wrong. The envoy, annoyed, praises Griselda's admirable ideals. He acknowledges her principles but dismisses them as worthless in the real world. He is impressed that she can think that way at her young age. He crushes his cigarette, declaring it's time to talk about reality. He asks what will happen to the large sum of money King Hall invested. She declares that she will neither give him the drug nor return the money. She pushes 10 million yen across the counter, telling him to take it. Yuga muses that drug development is an expensive endeavor. Even here, the gangster lets out a small, sinister chuckle of pure amusement. He looks at Griselda with contempt, asking if she has lost her mind. He reveals the contract's penalty clause. Failure means paying 10 times the investment. Yuga and Donatella look on in shock at the outrageous terms. Griselda realizes with horror that she must repay 100 million yen. She knows there is no way she can possibly pay back such a sum. She laments that she never imagined she would fail when she signed. The gangster coldly declares that her failure is none of his concern. He offers a cruel alternative. She can work off the debt in his shop. He sneers that maybe one day she'll pay it all off. Griselda is horrified. He tells her to stop talking nonsense and accept her fate. He grabs her face, demanding she hand over the drug to solve everything. He repeats his demand with a menacing glare, certain she will comply. Donatella notes that while it's awful, a signed contract is binding. Yuga intervenes, telling the gangster to let the child go. The gangster turns, enraged, asking who this annoying pest thinks he is. Yuga introduces himself with authority. He is Shiba Yuga, a lawyer. Griselda looks up, a glimmer of hope suddenly appearing in her eyes. The gangster has heard of him, but finds the situation very strange. Yuga declares that forcing a child to pay such a debt is unreasonable. He tells Griselda that she has the power to cancel such a contract. He confidently announces his legal strategy, the right of minors to rescind contracts. A text box displays the text of Civil Code, Article 5, Section 2. The gangster is momentarily stunned into silence by the legal argument. Yuga, confused by the silence, asks what is wrong. The gangster finds it amusing that a lawyer would bring up a minor's age. Griselda puffs out her chest, proudly announcing she is 17 years old. Yuga is shocked, realizing she's older than Donatella, yet still a child. The gangster throws his head back and roars with unrestrained laughter. He mockingly reveals that Luano's age of majority is only 15. Yuga is completely stunned, speechless by this critical revelation. He protests that under Japanese law, the age of majority is different. He desperately asks if anyone has the complete book of Luano law. A terrible premonition dawns on Griselda's face as she realizes what's happening. Yuga's hand trembles as he opens the massive God-given legal tome. He turns away, muttering in disbelief that it cannot possibly be true. He furiously realizes the goddess must have deliberately rewritten the law. A text box shows the altered law, Civil Code Article 4. A new chapter begins, explaining the principle of a minor's right to cancel a contract. The law exists to protect minors from being exploited by unscrupulous adults. However, the specific age of majority is determined by the law of the land. The god girl cheerfully explains she set the age to 15 to match local customs. Griselda is trapped. Hand over the drug or pay an impossible debt. The gangster lets out a small, satisfied chuckle, his victory assured. He laughs, finding it hilarious that a lawyer would be so ignorant. He tells Yuga he doesn't know the law, but a 15-year-old adult is common sense. He sneers that Yuga is useless, a man ignorant of basic truths. The gangster's words hit home. Yuga feels utterly and completely incompetent. Yuga understands now that Japanese law cannot be perfectly applied here. This world has kings and nobles, with entirely different societal values. A fantasy world with elves cannot use Japanese law as it is. He never imagined someone would actually rewrite the very law itself. The gangster asks Yuga if he's ever even been out in the real world. He calls Yuga a spoiled brat who has never known a day of hardship. Yuga clenches his fist, angered that this stranger understands him so well. He had felt superior because of his knowledge, a foundation now shattered. Donatella looks on with concern, sensing his deep internal struggle. Memories of his past failures and humiliations in Japan flood his mind. The gangster, seeing his advantage, asks if he is satisfied now. He renews his threat, telling Griselda to hand over the drug immediately. He grabs her face, warning her not to make him hurt her. Donatella watches, her expression hardening as she prepares to intervene. Baron Kinghol's thug scoffs, asking if they plan to fight him. Donatella smiles coolly, calling him out for his empty verbal threats. "What was that?" the gangster snarls, his face twisting in anger. Yuga tries to calm Donatella, but she casually tells him it's fine. The gangster seethes, questioning if this girl has the nerve to wield a weapon. He calls her a brat, but her unwavering confidence makes him hesitate. A close-up reveals Donatella's supremely self-assured, knowing smile. The thug's bravado cracks, a single bead of sweat betraying his uncertainty. Donatella asks what's wrong, observing that he seems to have lost his nerve. He retorts angrily, claiming he'd call the guards if he actually attacked. Donatella's expression turns serious. She admits her taunt was a shallow tactic. Her eye narrows with focus as she states that, without violence, only law remains. She gestures to Yuga, declaring that no one can defeat him in a legal battle. She asks for his confirmation, and a flustered Yuga lets out a nervous laugh. The gangster sneers, finding the idea that he's no match completely absurd. He challenges Yuga to use his law against King Hall's legitimate contract. He warns a lawyer to be ready for what happens when he refuses. With a dismissive wave, he dares Yuga to go ahead and try. He mocks Yuga's inaction, asking if he's simply incapable of doing anything. Yuga is frozen, wanting desperately to help Griselda but feeling powerless. He sympathizes with her, a girl trapped by a single unfortunate contract. But he knows he cannot allow her dangerous drug to be taken. He despairs, realizing that with the law rewritten, he has no options left. He is helpless, a stranger in a world whose common sense he doesn't know. Griselda looks on, her expression grim, as her situation seems utterly hopeless. Suddenly, a spark of realization flashes across Yuga's face. Donatella places a hand on his shoulder, sensing the change in him. The gangster, bored with the standoff, declares that this is getting tedious. Griselda is shocked as he announces that he is simply going home. He stops at the door, adding that he has a final word of warning. With a sinister smile, he advises her to be careful of fires tonight. Griselda gasps in pure terror, understanding his threat of arson. He waves a casual goodbye, leaving her frozen at her desk. She whispers for him to stop, but her voice is lost in fear. A voice from off-panel asks her about the drug, but it's not the gangsters. Donatella smiles, having successfully tricked the gangster into staying. Yuga interrupts, stating that the drug will not be necessary. He smirks with newfound confidence, declaring he can cancel the contract. The gangster turns back, his expression a mixture of confusion and suspicion. He demands to know what on earth Yuga is talking about. Yuga holds up 2 fingers, announcing that he has 2 questions. Griselda looks on, wondering what more there is to discuss at this point. Yuga reminds the gangster of something he said when they first arrived. Griselda tries to recall her words, thinking she said something of note. A flashback reveals her complaining about the long period of no contact. Yuga presses her, asking when she last spoke to King Hall's people. She asks what that has to do with anything, but he insists on an answer. She complains about his incessant questioning, but prepares to answer. She confirms that she hasn't heard a word since the day she signed. Yuga smiles slightly. Okay, he says, his trap being set. The gangster grows impatient, telling him to stop wasting time. Yuga explains that something about their conversation felt off to him. The gangster had claimed Griselda signed the contract out of pure ignorance. Donatella is shocked to learn that King Hall is a purveyor to the princess. The gangster confirms his earlier statement, impressed Yuga remembers so well. An unseen voice asks if there is truly anything strange about that. Yuga argues that it's impossible for Griselda not to know of King Hall. The gangster agrees, stating that there can be only one explanation. At the time of the contract, Griselda was merely an ignorant student. Yuga turns to Griselda for confirmation, and she agrees that it's true. She recalls her own boast about graduating from the university at 14. Yuga points out that she had said as much herself just moments ago. A flashback shows her proudly declaring her academic prowess. Donatella gasps, the crucial piece of the puzzle finally clicking into place. Yuga's eye gleams with triumph. "That's it!" he exclaims. He declares that Griselda was 14, a minor under Luano's law. The gangster and Griselda are both stunned speechless by this revelation. She was underage when she signed the legally binding contract. Donatella looks on, her expression one of dawning comprehension and shock. The gangster scoffs, claiming he was already aware of that fact. He argues that since she is 17 now, her past status is irrelevant. Yuga explains that being a minor at signing grants the right to cancel. He powerfully cites the law. The right to rescind expires after 5 years. The gangster is utterly floored, his legal argument completely shattered. Yuga shouts that the right to cancel the contract still exists. He turns to Griselda, commanding her to nullify the agreement now. The gangster sputters, calling the entire notion ridiculous. He glares at Griselda, trying to intimidate her into silence. Yuga warns him not to interfere with her legal right to cancel. Griselda shoves the money at him, yelling that she cancels the contract. Yuga confirms that with her rescission, the contract is now null and void. The gangster takes a furious step forward, his boots striking the floor. He roars that he will not accept this outcome, that it's outrageous. Yuga calmly states this is karmic justice for trying to exploit a child. The gangster vows King Hall's revenge and threatens to sue them in court. Yuga proudly accepts, declaring he will act as Griselda's representative. The gangster's face twitches with fury, realizing he has been cornered. Yuga knows King Hall's shady business model cannot survive public scrutiny. With Griselda's case, all of King Hall's other investments would be forfeit. The thought of King Hall's utter ruin brings a grim satisfaction. The gangster falls silent, defeated. Griselda acknowledges his concession. He sighs, admitting that if that's the law, he has no choice. But he adds, this is his job and he must see it through. His eyes gleam with malice as he vows to kill them and take the drug. He brandishes his blade, leaving his audience completely stunned. Yuga looks on in disbelief, asking what on earth he is talking about. The gangster takes another menacing step forward, his intent clear. Griselda stares at him, her face pale with abject fear. She squeezes her eyes shut, letting out a terrified gasp. He raises the knife high above his head, screaming for her to die. Yuga cries out in alarm, his face a mask of utter panic. He screams at Griselda that she is lying and must run for her life. Donatella intercepts the gangster, a glowing magical circle stopping his blade. The gangster looks back in shock, his attack thwarted by her immense power. A blinding light emanates from the point of impact as the magic crackles. He is completely bewildered by this sudden, overwhelming display of force. Donatella smiles coolly as she prepares to unleash the full force of her spell. A massive explosion erupts, blowing out the entire storefront in a violent blast. Yuga mutters in disbelief, stunned by the sheer scale of the destruction. The gangster is pinned to a wall across the street, impaled by magical vines. Yuga tells Donatella she went too far, but she says she didn't kill him. He realizes she planned this from the start, intending to end the fight quickly. He understands her reasoning. She meant to counter his violence with her own. Donatella smiles cheekily, asking if this counts as an act of necessity. Yuga wryly corrects her, explaining that this would be considered self-defense. As the guards arrive, Yuga throws his hands up in weary surrender. Griselda reflects that she always considered law a lowly discipline for commoners. She bursts into laughter, admitting she was a fool to overlook her vulnerability. Yuga wonders if he is truly the failure the gangster claimed him to be. Donatella watches him with admiration, certain he is the one chosen by God. He knows his lack of common sense in this world is a great flaw, but he resolves to study and adapt, realizing he is growing as a lawyer. Griselda gratefully offers to build anything he wants as thanks for his help. Yuga is skeptical of her sudden generosity and change in attitude. Donatella notes that with Griselda's help, he'll be fine if he gets drunk again. Yuga insists that Griselda must properly thank Donatella for saving her. Griselda puffs out her cheeks, embarrassed by his stern lecture. He tells her Donatella saved her life, so she must thank her properly. Griselda stammers, saying an adult should have better manners than this. She knows she must act properly and not like a pouting child. Tears of embarrassment and frustration well up in her eyes. Flustered, she manages to mumble a quiet, sincere, "Thank you." She proudly asks how that was, and Donatella simply calls her cute. That night, a grand, dark mansion stands beneath a starry sky. Inside, a maid watches over her master's still form as a new chapter begins. The maid wonders how everything could have gone so terribly wrong. Her perfect plan had been ruined by a single, unforeseen mistake. Griselda excitedly tells Yuga he must help her test her new products. Yuga is horrified at the prospect of being her personal guinea pig. Griselda explains she has no time for chores now that they live with her. She reveals she has a surplus sleeping draft from a recent commission. She had wondered if she could find some other use for the potion. She scolds Yuga, telling him he should take sleeping pills for his insomnia. This gave her the idea to weaponize the sleeping draft for self-defense. Her method is simple. A needle coated in the drug strikes the target. She integrated the device into everyday items to be ready for emergencies. She proudly presents her pocket watch-style sleeping draft injector. Yuga asks if his tie can be fitted with a voice recorder function. Griselda scoffs at his idea, telling him to use common sense. He realizes she intends to test the device on him and flatly refuses. The shop bell jingles as a maid enters, surprising Yuga. The maid explains she has come to pay for a recent service. Griselda tells her to be sure to follow the instructions she provided. The maid pays her, and Griselda thanks her for the business. Griselda decides to continue her experiment now that the customer has left. In a flashback, Griselda yells that the thief, Marte, has escaped. Griselda turns her attention back to a very nervous Donatella. She tries to reassure Donatella, but the elf is clearly unwilling to be a test subject. Later, Yuga and Donatella take a walk through the quiet city streets. Donatella suggests they go on a trip since they have some free time. Yuga remembers that Donatella used to be a wanderer before they met. She suggests several terrifying destinations, much to Yuga's dismay. Yuga agrees a vacation is a good idea, as long as it's safe. Their plans are suddenly interrupted by the arrival of the royal guard, Liliana. Liliana complains that she spent half the day searching all over for them. She grumbles that chasing after them is not part of her official duties. Yuga smugly asks what she wants, and she remembers her purpose. Liliana gravely informs him that he is ordered to defend a new client. The grave charge against this new defendant is murder. She reveals the defendant's name is Lorencia Postlethwaite. A beautiful, dark-haired maid sits silently behind a prison fence. Her sad eyes look up as she asks who her visitor is. Yuga, flustered by her beauty, introduces himself as her lawyer. She immediately asks him to leave, stunning him into silence. He asks if he offended her, but she insists that's not the reason. She says she cannot trouble such a famous lawyer with her humble case. Yuga tells her that she is wrong to think that way about herself. He declares that he is her lawyer and will defend her with all his might. He insists that it doesn't matter who she is. He is there to help her. Her eyes widen, moved by his passionate declaration of support. He asks her to tell him what happened, and she begins her story. She was a maid in the service of the lecherous Baron Bapu Orikok. The incident took place at the Baron's grand and imposing mansion. 3 nights ago, she was summoned to the master's private bedroom. There she was discovered with the Baron, who had a knife in his chest. Yuga asks if she has any idea who the real killer could be. Lorencia clenches her fists in her lap, her voice trembling with emotion. She confesses that she was the one who killed the master. Yuga, Donatella, and Liliana are shocked by her sudden admission. Yuga confirms that she killed Baron Orikok with a knife from the room. He gently asks her why she would do such a terrible thing. She explains that he had ordered her to serve him in his bed. She found the thought unbearable and stabbed him before she knew what she was doing. She apologizes, but Yuga tells her she has no need to apologize to him. Liliana expresses her sympathy for Lorencia's difficult situation. Liliana explains Lorencia is a maiden of the lake, bound by a curse. The curse dictates that the man who takes her purity is destined to die. If the curse activates, she will be confined to the mansion for life. Yuga is rendered speechless by the sheer horror of her inescapable fate. He glares through the fence, declaring her situation is simply too cruel. Yuga argues that if the king understands the reasons, a lighter sentence is possible. The law states murder is punishable by death, life, or a minimum of 5 years. He turns from the prison cell, certain that the punishment will not be severe. Liliana sharply tells Yuga to stop his wishful thinking. She reminds him that a commoner has killed a nobleman. A vision of a burning mansion illustrates the brutal punishments of the old laws. Liliana explains the king cannot afford to look weak before the other nobles. A guillotine looms over Lorencia. A harsh sentence is all but guaranteed. Yuga stammers, shocked by the grim political reality of the situation. He stands silently, processing the crushing weight of her words. Liliana warns that giving Lorencia false hope now would be truly cruel. Yuga clenches his fist, vowing to find evidence that can persuade the king. He declares that Lorencia is not in the wrong, and he will not let this happen. Standing protectively before Lorencia, he proclaims that he will save her. A horse-drawn carriage clatters down the road, carrying them to the crime scene. Inside, Yuga is deep in thought while Donatella looks out the window. Donatella turns to him, asking if he has a plan in mind. She wonders how he can possibly protect Lorencia after his grand declaration. With his eyes closed, Yuga admits he doesn't have a concrete strategy yet. He thinks about Lorencia's confession, which makes a self-defense claim difficult. His only option is to argue for a reduced sentence, from death to 5 years. He declares that he must find a reason why killing the nobleman was unavoidable. He knows this crucial piece of evidence must be at the crime scene. A young guard salutes them, asking if he is the renowned Lord Shiba Yudi. Yuga confirms his identity, wondering if the military is still investigating. The guards gossip about the god-chosen lawyer and his strange necktie. The lead guard explains that Liliana has briefed them and invites them inside. As the heavy doors swing open, a voice from within welcomes them. A maid introduces herself as Ununice Pettingar, the head of the Orikok household staff. She will guide them through the mansion, much to Yuga's surprise. Yuga recognizes her from Griselda's shop and wonders if she remembers him. Ununice smiles politely, gesturing for them to follow her inside. She leads them into the master's bedroom, the preserved crime scene. She finishes her introduction of the room, standing beside a stunned Yuga. Yuga asks if he may question her about the crime scene. He asks who first discovered the body, and Ununice confirms it was her. He requests a detailed account of that night, excluding Lorencia's involvement. Ununice agrees, beginning her story of the events from the night before last. In a flashback, she recalls escorting a solemn Lorencia to the master's room. She waited outside for an hour, but receiving no call, she went to check. Her face darkens as she remembers the horrific scene she discovered. She found the Baron dead, a knife in his chest, and a horrified Lorencia beside him. She explains that she immediately alerted the other servants. She concludes her testimony, stating this is how things came to be. Donatella murmurs that Lorencia's guilt seems impossible to dispute. Donatella asks Ununice if she can ask a question, and Ununice permits it. Donatella bluntly asks why Lorencia was summoned to the bedroom. Ununice replies with a single cold phrase, "For night service." She explains that it was the master's custom to summon servants to his bed. Donatella is shocked, asking if Lorencia also mentioned this arrangement. Ununice feigns surprise, asking if she was not already aware of this. Donatella looks disgusted, while Ununice remains completely impassive. Donatella turns her fury on Yuga, asking why human men are so depraved. Ununice calmly states that while some servants dislike the duty, it is expected. Her gaze hardens as she insists it's no reason to kill one's master. Yuga looks down, reluctantly conceding that she may have a point. Donatella's face is a mask of fury, a single word hanging in the air. But she whirls around, declaring that she still cannot forgive the Baron. During the argument, Yuga ignores them, pulling at the bedsheets. Donatella notices him, asking what he is doing. She calls his name, trying to get his attention as he focuses on the sheet. He finally looks up, admitting he wasn't listening, much to her annoyance. His eyes are fixed on something he has just discovered on the bed. He stands before the bed, where a dark bloodstain is visible on the mattress. Yuga asks the guard if this evidence will be submitted at the trial. The guard says only items ordered by the captain have been seized. Yuga asks them to seize the sheet, noting this would never happen in Japan. A look of realization dawns on his face as he sees an opening. Donatella turns to him, asking what is wrong. He tells her with quiet confidence that he can do this, much to her confusion. He declares he may be able to prove Lorencia's innocence after all. A flashback begins. Lorencia recalls being sold by a human trafficker. Her new master was harsh, and she was constantly crying over her failures. But Ununice was always kind, giving her a special uniform and telling her not to cry. The headmaid would wipe her tears and hold her in a comforting embrace. Lorencia admits that Ununice and her uniform became her greatest aspiration. Back in the present, Donatella nervously notes that the trial is about to start. She and Lorencia watch Yuga, hoping he has a plan. Yuga walks right past them, lost in thought, and Donatella calls him out. He apologizes for being distracted, and Lorencia quietly calls out to him. She asks what this strangely dressed man is trying to defend her from. A memory of her blood-stained hands flashes in his mind. Lorencia's voice echoes. She killed the Baron with her own hands. Yuga stands with his back to her, processing her confession. Donatella asks if he's okay, but he confidently says his plan is set. Before the trial, he tells Lorencia there is just one more thing. Lorencia rejects him, saying she has no need for a lawyer. He looks at her, confused by her sudden refusal. She insists that she killed someone and has no intention of running away. She is prepared to accept her punishment, even if it is the death penalty. Yuga listens patiently, a thoughtful expression on his face. He agrees that one must take responsibility for their actions. But he insists he will not let her take blame for something she didn't do. He tells her to focus on the trial for now. Lorencia looks down, her expression a mix of sorrow and resignation. Yuga worries that he is coming off as a creepy old man. Donatella quietly says Lorencia's name, her expression concerned. She asks Lorencia if her birthday isn't coming up soon. Lorencia confirms today is her 15th birthday, and Donatella congratulates her. Yuga overhears this and tells Lorencia that everything will be fine now. Yuga stands resolute, declaring that he has gathered all the materials he needs for court. Flanked by his allies, he strides forward, vowing with a smirk to win this trial. The courtroom gallery is filled with a diverse assembly of humans and other fantasy races. The king's ornate crown sits high, a heavy symbol of his absolute authority over proceedings. King Marius surveys the chamber, observing that all the necessary parties are now present. From his throne, the king's voice booms, officially declaring that the court is now in session. Prosecutor Joan Wyson gives a cool smile, signaling for the prosecution to begin its case. Seated in the gallery, Lorencia looks down in despair, the weight of the trial crushing her. Joan details the murder, stressing the heavy responsibility for killing a nobleman like Baron Orikok. His eyes narrow with conviction as he prepares to make his final, damning request. Joan demands the death penalty, a verdict that makes Lorencia flinch in utter horror. The prosecutor then announces his intention to call a witness to the stand. He turns to Yuga, hoping his opponent's earlier boasts were just empty, foolish words. Yuga, his expression firm and unyielding, gives the simple order to bring in the witness. Lorencia lets out a sharp gasp of disbelief, recognizing the person now entering the court. The headmaid, Ununice, enters, her glowing spectacles masking her true expression. Lorencia whispers the headmaid's name, her voice trembling with sorrow and confusion. The witness is formally identified as Ununice Pettingar, headmaid of the Orichalc estate. From the witness stand, Ununice addresses the heartbroken young woman by her first name. She expresses her sorrow that things have come to this, though she has more to say. She offers a kind smile, promising they can work together again after Lorencia atones for her crime. Overcome with emotion, Lorencia tearfully calls out the headmaid's name in gratitude. She breaks down completely, sobbing apologies for the crime she believes she committed. Yuga watches calmly, quietly telling her that it is still far too early for apologies. Annoyed, Joan dismisses the emotional display and urges the witness to continue her testimony. Ununice testifies that Lorencia was ordered to attend to the Baron for the night. The gallery murmurs in shock as she reveals the victim's vile habit with his maids. She recounts preparing the room and escorting Lorencia to the Baron around 9 o'clock. She states that after 2 hours she found the scene, certain Lorencia was the killer. Yuga begins his argument, acknowledging that while his client deserves forgiveness, there is more to it. Ununice reveals to the shocked court that Lorencia is a cursed maiden of the lake. She turns to the king, begging not for forgiveness, but for a merciful, lenient sentence. The gallery is conflicted, torn between pity for her plight and the gravity of her crime. In the defendant's box, Lorencia sits with an expression of profound, silent sorrow. King Marius, his expression stern, commands the lawyer to begin his counter-argument. Princess Vivienne watches with amusement, certain the defendant's guilt is an undeniable fact. Lorencia's only hope seems to be a desperate plea for mercy, a lighter punishment. All eyes are on the undefeated lawyer, a man with a flawless record. The princess wonders what kind of performance this legendary lawyer will deliver now. The king presides over the court, his gaze heavy with royal authority. On the witness stand, the headmaid Ununice maintains a stoic, unreadable expression. Prosecutor Joan Wyson watches with smug confidence, victory seemingly within his grasp. Yuga steps forward, his voice clear as he prepares to state his argument. He makes a stunning declaration: his client did not kill the victim. Donatella gasps in disbelief, a bead of sweat tracing her temple. Even Princess Vivienne's composure is broken, her eye wide with genuine surprise. The entire courtroom is thrown into a state of stunned, confused silence. The prosecutor scoffs, a bead of sweat on his brow, utterly incredulous. He bursts into laughter, dismissing the claim as completely ridiculous and nonsensical. Yuga cuts him off, his focus unwavering as he demands to question the witness. The headmaid calmly agrees, inviting him to ask her anything he wishes. Yuga begins his cross-examination, noting her testimony seems logical but contradictory. He accuses her directly, his sharp gaze cutting through her facade of truth. Her eye narrows in annoyance, though she claims she has simply omitted many details. She feigns innocence, asking for forgiveness due to her unfamiliarity with the court. But Yuga is relentless, preparing to ask his next crucial question. He confirms a key fact. She knew Lorencia was coming of age today. Ununice admits that, of course, she was aware of her colleague's birthday. Yuga then asks her to confirm the Baron's vile habit of targeting maids. He poses the central contradiction. Why was this night service moved up? Donatella suddenly understands the timeline, her eyes wide with realization. Lorencia came of age today. The incident occurred 3 days prior. She wonders how Yuga noticed this detail, as if he knew all along. The headmaid is flustered, her perfect composure finally beginning to crack. She weakly claims she was only following her master's orders, suggesting a whim. Yuga smirks, noting it's far too convenient to be killed on a whim. Prosecutor Joan impatiently demands an opinion, but Yuga coolly decides to proceed. Yuga mentally reconstructs the crime, questioning why a knife was used. Donatella, confused by his reasoning, is told that the situation is strange. His mind fixates on a single glaring inconsistency, the presence of the knife. A quiet gasp escapes Donatella as the troubling implication finally dawns on her. Yuga reasons that the defendant did not bring the weapon into the room. This means the knife must have already been there, planted by someone else. The gallery murmurs, now wondering who could have placed the weapon there. Yuga points his accusation directly at the headmaid on the witness stand. Princess Vivienne watches from above, expressing silent frustration with the proceedings. Prosecutor Joan is left sputtering in utter shock by the lawyer's bold claim. The headmaid Ununice addresses Yuga, her composure still unnervingly intact. She calmly suggests that Yuga has forgotten one key person in his theory. She proposes the victim himself brought the knife into the room for self-defense. The king agrees, stating it's not unnatural for a former soldier to be armed. Unfazed, Ununice maintains her serene and confident expression, the picture of control. She confidently offers to tell him anything else he thinks she has forgotten. Her posture is a clear, unspoken challenge to the lawyer from another world. She insists the killer's identity is already perfectly obvious to everyone in court. In the defendant's box, Lorencia looks down in despair, her hope extinguished. Yuga's gaze, however, remains sharp and focused, completely undeterred by the setback. He calmly insists he has just one final point to make to end things. Ununice politely agrees to hear his final question, still appearing utterly confident. Yuga begins by restating a simple fact from the maid's own testimony. She asks his point, but he claims she is hiding a crucial detail. Ununice challenges him to name this hidden fact, feigning complete ignorance. Yuga reveals the critical detail. The victim was already asleep upon Lorencia's arrival. He presses the headmaid for confirmation, asking if his assertion isn't true. She asks if the defendant told him, but he insists it's strange or otherwise. He argues it is impossible for a slender girl to kill a soldier unless he slept. The gallery considers his compelling point, agreeing that his logic seems sound. He poses the central paradox. Why was the Baron asleep for his own rendezvous? Yuga confronts the witness, demanding an explanation for this glaring inconsistency. The headmaid Ununice calmly denies the accusation, her closed eyes hiding deep secrets. In the courtroom, Ununice told Yuga that he must surely be tired now. Yuga, however, felt that something about her perfect story was absolutely wrong. He asked her if she was trying to hide something deeply suspicious from him. The truth of the matter, he explained, was why the victim was asleep. Baron Orikok was sleeping because he had been given a powerful sleeping draft. Ununice let out a small, almost imperceptible gasp, her composure finally cracking. "Griselda!" Yuga's voice boomed, summoning his surprise witness to the stand. The genius inventor burst through the courtroom doors, demanding to know what was going on. Yuga pointed to the witness stand, asking if she sold a drug to Ununice. Griselda confirmed without a doubt that she sold a sleeping potion to that woman. It was a shame, she added, as she had repeatedly warned her about the dosage. Yuga watched her, his plan proceeding perfectly as Griselda looked on, confused. Princess Vivienne, watching from her box, asked if the witness drugged the victim. Yuga confirmed to the king in the court that this was exactly what happened. Ununice insisted it was her duty to help her master, who suffered from insomnia. Unimpressed, Yuga ordered a guard to bring in the final piece of evidence. Prosecutor Joan wondered what it could be, his expression one of confusion. A guard returned carrying a large white bedsheet, marred by a single dark stain. This, Yuga explained, was the sheet covering the victim when Lorencia stabbed him. The king looked down from his high throne, asking what the point of this was. Yuga urged him to look closer, pointing out the impossibly small bloodstain. The king conceded that a deep knife wound should have bled far more profusely. He noted that the victim was stabbed, yet there was almost no blood at all. Princess Vivienne then posed the crucial question, could such a thing even be possible? Yuga's eye widened, his entire theory clicking into place with her question. Yes, he answered, it is possible, when the victim's blood has stopped flowing. The princess listened intently, her gaze sharp, understanding the implication. She lowered her fan, realizing the stunning truth he was about to reveal. Yuga declared that this single piece of evidence pointed to one undeniable fact. At the moment Lorencia stabbed him, Baron Orikok was already dead. Lorencia gasped, the truth washing over her. She was not a murderer. The court erupted as Yuga explained the victim was dead before he was stabbed. The gallery murmured, wondering what this revelation meant for Lorencia's fate. Yuga cited the law. It was corpse desecration, not murder, a lesser crime. Lorencia looked up, a glimmer of hope finally returning to her eyes. Therefore, he declared, with no malicious intent, Lorencia had committed no crime. Donatella watched in awe, a bead of sweat on her temple, stunned by his logic. Behind her fan, Princess Vivienne observed the dramatic turn of events with interest. Prosecutor Joan was left sweating and speechless, his entire case now in ruins. Yuga insisted this was no accident. Someone had orchestrated the entire affair. This person had constructed an elaborate plot to hide an inconvenient truth. His gaze sharpened as he turned his attention back to the witness stand. The killer, he declared, his voice ringing with authority, is Ununice Pettengar. He explained that she wanted her master dead but couldn't face the death penalty. So, she devised a cruel plan to have the innocent Lorencia kill him instead. She knew Lorencia, as a maiden of the lake, would refuse the Baron's advances. She drugged him, placed a knife by his bed, and sent the girl to be framed. However, Yuga said, raising a finger, there was one problem with her plan. Griselda explained it was the dosage. A much stronger potion was needed for the Baron. So, Ununice had to test the drug to see how much was required for a deep sleep. Her fatal miscalculation was that the Baron died during this very test. The massive dose of the potion combined with alcohol proved to be a lethal cocktail. Panicked, Ununice realized she would now be accused of murder. So in that moment, she was forced to alter her plan. She staged the scene of the crime around the already dead victim. She made it appear as if Lorencia had killed him, timing it perfectly for that night. Donatella finally understood why the incident happened just before Lorencia came of age. Yuga finished his reconstruction, his eyes fixed on the now silent witness. He pointed a finger, his voice booming with finality. "The killer is you!" Prosecutor Joan was aghast, calling the accusation ridiculous and impossible. He furiously dismissed Yuga's entire theory as nothing more than baseless speculation. He demanded that Ununice deny the outrageous claims being made against her. Yuga calmly stated that he could easily tear apart such a simple denial. He told Ununice he had one last question that had bothered him from the start. Why would she, the witness, go through with such a convoluted and risky plan? He agreed that having someone else commit murder is the perfect crime. Yet, the entire plot hinged on the scapegoat not being a maiden of the lake. She had waited a very long time for the perfect person to arrive at the mansion. Could she truly have worked for so long under a man she hated so much? She wanted to avoid the death penalty and somehow escape the mansion's confines. The witness's unusual fortitude was the one thing that had troubled him most. But, he explained, if you assume one crucial fact, it all makes perfect sense. He stared at Ununice, preparing to deliver the final, devastating blow to her testimony. Prosecutor Joan could only look on, completely bewildered by Yuga's line of reasoning. The witness, Yuga revealed, is also a maiden of the lake. He explained that she didn't leave the mansion because she simply couldn't leave. Why, he demanded, would she trap a girl in the same hellish circumstances? He asked if this act would truly clear her of her long-held resentment. Joan, enraged, ordered Yuga to stop his baseless and insulting accusations. But Ununice cut him off, whispering that he didn't know anything at all. The prosecutor looked at her, confused by her sudden and chilling change in demeanor. A horrific flashback showed Ununice being violated, chained, and paraded as a curiosity. She stated that she had been used her entire life as a tool for desire. Her voice rose to a scream, asking why she couldn't be the one to use others. Lorencia cried out from her seat, protesting this cruel version of the truth. She insisted that Ununice was kind to her, that she wasn't that kind of person. Ununice smiled coldly, asking if the girl hadn't been listening to her story. She revealed she had been waiting for someone who could kill the Baron for her. She planned to use Lorencia from the start, knowing her trust would be absolute. Lorencia was heartbroken, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Yuga watched the tragic scene unfold, his expression grim and heavy. The gallery was horrified by the confession, calling Ununice a terrible woman. Lorencia sat, defeated and crushed by the cruel truth of the betrayal. But she found her voice again, insisting that it wasn't true. Ununice looked at her, surprised by her continued and unwavering defiance. Lorencia said she had always believed that Ununice was a good person at heart. She remembered how Ununice would comfort her with a smile whenever she failed. But she could always see a deep and profound sadness behind that smile. She finally understood that in this trial, Ununice was seeing herself in her. Lorencia felt she was saved by someone who thought of her as their own. In the solemn courtroom, Lorencia begins to speak her final, heartfelt words. Tears stream down her face as she tells Ununice she is a kind person. Through her spectacles, Ununice's eyes watch the emotional display with a complex look. She turns away slightly, dismissing the young maid's sentiment as foolish. With a sad, knowing smile, she laments what a truly foolish girl Lorencia is. King Marius closes his eyes, having heard all the claims presented in the trial. Prosecutor Joan Wyson acknowledges that all arguments have now been made. The king rises, preparing to deliver the court's final and unanimous verdict. He declares that the court finds Lorencia did not commit the act of murder. With a voice full of authority, he pronounces the defendant, Lorencia, not guilty. Lorencia whispers the words in disbelief, unable to process her sudden freedom. Donatella winks, reminding her that she told her to have faith in Sheba. The young maid looks on, still overwhelmed by the stunning turn of events. Ununice is escorted from the witness stand, pausing beside the acquitted girl. She offers a genuine warm smile, telling Lorencia she is glad for her. Lorencia cries out her name, her emotions finally overflowing in a wave of relief. But their quiet reunion is cut short by the prosecutor's sharp command. Joan Wyson, his face a mask of grim duty, gestures for the guards to act. He gives the firm order for them to arrest the woman, Ununice Pettengar. The royal guards immediately surround the headmaid, taking her into custody. Lorencia cries out in protest, asking what they are doing to her mentor. Joan admits his earlier mistake but insists he must now arrest the real killer. His expression is cold and unforgiving as he carries out his professional duty. He states that Ununice, having killed a noble, is now awaiting execution. The words death penalty strike Lorencia with a new and sudden horror. The gallery murmurs in agreement, saying that she brought this upon herself. Lorencia cries out to Ununice, but Joan sternly tells her to give up hope. The crowd roars, questioning who would ever forgive the murder of a noble. Joan declares that such a person has no right to live in their country. He insists that the death penalty for her crime is absolutely unavoidable. A single calm voice cuts through the chaos, declaring that isn't so. Joan turns, completely baffled by the sudden and confident interruption. Yuga states that Ununice will not be executed, as she is not a murderer. He tells the stunned prosecutor to simply think about the facts of the case. He explains that murder requires the specific intent to kill another person. Ununice's act was bodily harm, which unintentionally resulted in a death. He cites the law, proving it's injury resulting in death, not murder. He vows that as her lawyer, he will never allow her to be executed. Joan grits his teeth, his legal argument completely dismantled and defeated. Ununice calmly accepts that a long prison sentence is still her inevitable fate. As the guards lead her away, Lorencia runs toward her mentor one last time. With tears in her eyes, she promises that she will definitely visit her. Ununice turns back with a small, sad smile, telling her she will be waiting. She is then escorted from the courtroom, her future now in Yuga's hands. Lorencia watches her go, a mix of sorrow and relief on her face. Yuga approaches the distraught young maid, placing a hand on her shoulder. He promises to defend Ununice with all his might, assuring a good outcome. She looks at him with tearful gratitude, her faith in him restored. From her high box, Princess Vivienne observes the scene with keen interest. She is impressed by Yuga's victory and feels she must reevaluate him. The princess decides it would be a waste to crush him. It's better to use him. Sometime later, a maid greets them at the door of their new grand residence. She introduces herself as Lorencia Postlethwaite, their new attendant. She announces she will be their maid, formally addressing Yuga as master. He tells her not to be so formal, glad for her help, especially with meals. She asks if calling him master is too embarrassing for him. Her suggestion to call him my lord instead sends him into a panic. He yelps that while the idea is nice, it's still completely unacceptable. Donatella asks about her uniform, and Lorencia confirms her suspicion. She explains that this is the work uniform that belonged to Ununice. Ununice entrusted it to her as the official symbol of the headmaid. She vows to serve with pride so as not to bring shame to the uniform. Yuga admires her professionalism, thinking Ununice would surely be proud. He had no idea he would soon be caught in a kingdom-shaking event. Life continues peacefully for the trio in their new grand residence. At breakfast, Lorencia presents a tray of freshly baked bread to the table. Yuga happily asks for a piece, clearly enjoying the delicious meal. Donatella feels out of place, her own domestic skills seemingly unnecessary. Lorencia, the new maid, thanks Yuga for the compliment on her cooking. He notes that Lorencia is an excellent maid, even converting him to bread. Her skills are perfect in every way, from cooking and cleaning to gardening. The problem for Donatella is that these were all supposed to be her duties. As an assistant, she feels like a useless freeloader who can't contribute. Her powerful necromancy is of no real use in their everyday lives. As Donatella despairs, a cheerful Yuga asks for another helping of food. He sighs contentedly, remarking on how delicious the meal was today. Donatella teases him, suggesting he might be getting a little bit fat. He begs her to stop, worried about his slowing metabolism at his age. Lorencia chimes in that a well-built man has more dignity and presence. Yuga says that's not comforting, as Lorencia presents him with a letter. He recognizes the familiar, ornate wax seal on the mysterious envelope. Realizing he can't read the script, he asks Lorencia to read it for him. Donatella pouts with puffed cheeks, as reading for him is her job. Lorencia announces it's an invitation to a dinner party at the royal palace. Yuga is shocked, and Lorencia tells him this is an amazing development. She explains how rare it is for a commoner, and he can hardly believe it. He imagines them wanting to hear the secrets of his brilliant legal career. He boasts about how hard he's worked in this strange and chaotic new world. Donatella dryly notes that he isn't used to being praised by other people. Yuga assumes the invitation is from the king, but Lorencia corrects him. Donatella realizes with a jolt that the invitation is from the princess. Yuga is pleased, calling it a perk of the job, but Donatella is silent. Donatella's eyes narrow with deep suspicion. She knows this is a trap. Seeing her silent and troubled expression, Yuga asks her what is wrong. She thinks back to the trial, unsettled by the princess's cold, calculating gaze. That evening, under a starry sky, Yuga prepares to leave for the palace. Lorencia and Donatella stand at the door to see him off for the night. He cheerfully says goodbye, but Donatella suddenly calls out for him to wait. She places her hand on his chest, a soft, magical light beginning to glow. A magic circle appears as she casts a protective ward on his lucky tie. Donatella confronts Yuga, a glowing magical circle pressed against his chest. He asks what she's done. She casts a curse warding spell on his tie. He insists the palace is safe, but she says the spell is necessary. She looks at him earnestly, certain that the magic will protect him. Yuga gently pats her on the head, trying to calm her worries. He smiles, saying her magic has often saved him, so he'll accept it. A blushing Donatella insists that she is not a child. With a cheerful wave, Yuga announces he is leaving for the palace. Lorencia asks Donatella if the necktie is the cloth around his neck. She finds its organ pattern strange, unsure of its purpose. Lorencia teasingly asks if Donatella is perhaps in love with their master. With a knowing smile, she says a reliable man is quite desirable. Donatella turns away flustered, denying that is the reason at all. Lorencia giggles, saying Master Sheba is hopeless with romance anyway. A royal retainer announces to Princess Viviana that Sheba Yuga has arrived. The princess calmly acknowledges the news, fanning herself beside her advisor. She instructs her retainer to proceed with the plan, leaving it to her. Her advisor, Selena, addresses the princess by her nickname, Vivi. Selena questions if she is serious about bringing Yuga into their circle. From behind her fan, the princess simply affirms her decision. She reflects that Yuga is far more capable than she first thought. Because of his great skill, she has decided she wants to use him. She declares with cold certainty that she always gets what she desires. Yuga happily raises a glass of champagne, calling for another refill. He praises the princess for her excellent hospitality in the grand dining hall. He tells her the beer was wonderful, leaning in close with a smile. The princess asks him to explain the all-you-can-drink concept. He explains it's a system where the price is fixed for unlimited drinks. She finds this interesting, noting his world can mass-produce cheap alcohol. An old nobleman advises the princess not to mind Yuga's strange ways. The princess tells Yuga she feels it is a waste to keep him as a lawyer. Yuga is taken aback by her sudden and serious statement. He asks what she means, as she had acknowledged his legal skills. She dismisses his work, asking how many people he has truly saved. His otherworldly knowledge, she argues, could save tens of millions of people. The old nobles at the table urge him to listen to the princess. She leans in close, telling him to quit being a lawyer and serve her. Her whispered proposition hangs in the air between them. Flustered by her proximity, Yuga can only stammer her name in surprise. An old man warns that defying the princess is defying the will of God. The princess laughs, brushing off the man's intensity as a mere joke. She asks Yuga to tell her more, but an old man grumbles in disapproval. The old man mutters about conservative, foolish old men as he drinks. The princess declares she won't be foolish. She gets what she wants. She raises her glass, toasting to the glory and development of Luano. An ominous silence falls, signaling a dark turn of events. Yuga's eyes widen in shock as a wave of sickness hits him. A servant helps him up, telling him to hold on just a bit longer. The servant leads the ailing Yuga to a guest room for the night. Yuga groans weakly as he collapses onto the bed, fully clothed. The servant Antonello stands over his unconscious form. He glances back with a cold, determined expression. He tells someone waiting outside that they can come in now. The grand castle stands imposing and silent against a cloudy sky. Yuga groans, slowly beginning to stir from his drugged sleep. He sits up with a yawn, the heavy stench of alcohol in the air. He looks down and freezes, noticing his necktie. He realizes with a start that he stayed the night in the castle. He cries out in alarm, holding up his lucky tie, which is burned. As he inspects the damage, he senses he is not alone. He turns to find a woman lying beside him, her eyes open and lifeless. He stammers, wondering if this was some kind of one-night encounter. His mind reels with shock and confusion at the impossible scene. He reaches out a trembling hand, knowing this can't be real. A terrified scream echoes from the high tower of the royal castle. Guards identify the victim as Luciana Velg, a 32-year-old castle servant. Prosecutor Joan announces the cause of death, asphyxiation by a binding spell. He declares that this means it was a murder committed with magic. The magical investigation, he states, has confirmed this fact. Joan's eyes narrow as he prepares to make his final accusation. He points dramatically, naming the suspect Shiba Yuga. Yuga's eyes widen in absolute, uncomprehending shock. He pleads with Joan to wait, questioning the absurd accusation. He shouts his innocence, saying he doesn't remember killing anyone. Joan calmly replies that all the evidence points directly to him. He asks Yuga if he is beginning to understand the situation. He explains that Yuga was the only guest at last night's party. A diagram shows the crime scene in a corridor with no other exits. 3 soldiers stood constant guard, making unnoticed entry impossible. Joan asks if he is following, and Yuga can only nod weakly. He states that the guards testified to 3 movements that night. First, the victim entered. Then, Antonello entered with Yuga. Finally, the servant Antonello was seen leaving the room by himself. Yuga argues that it's strange for him to be the only suspect. He frantically suggests that perhaps Antonello was the one who killed her. Joan dismisses this with a smug look, saying it is impossible. Yuga demands to know why, frustrated by the prosecutor's certainty. Joan explains Antonello is a lowly servant, a mere escort for a drunk. He states that such a simple servant could not possibly use magic. He explains that magic users are extremely rare and valuable assets. The only 3 in the castle are powerful figures, not servants. There is no reason for a man with such a gift to be a servant. Furthermore, at only 18, Antonello's guilt is even more unlikely. Yuga argues the possibility isn't zero, that Antonello could have changed. Joan dismisses this as baseless and uncertain speculation. He turns the argument, stating the probability of Yuga's guilt is higher. He says the chance Yuga is a magic user is far greater than Antonello. Yuga shouts that he can't use magic and demands proof. Joan confirms he has proof, pointing an accusatory finger. As a god-chosen otherworldly person, it's not strange for Yuga to use magic. Prosecutor Joan states that even if Yuga can't use magic, he remains a suspect. He explains that they have no choice but to doubt Yuga's claims of innocence. Joan then issues a sharp challenge, asking if Yuga can prove he is unable to use magic. Yuga understands the impossible demand. It is the devil's proof, a logical trap. He reflects on how his otherworldly nature has always made him an anomaly in Luano. To them, it's not strange to assume he has powers that defy their common sense. Joan asks if Yuga understands his predicament now. He then informs a tense Yuga that he is to be taken away. Before a grand throne, Joan declares that the king has summoned him for a trial. Yuga is told that he must defend himself and prove he cannot wield magic. Joan offers a single alternative. He could call upon another lawyer to defend him. Yuga contemplates his options, the word magic echoing in his mind. A sudden spark of realization ignites in his wide, determined eye. He makes his choice, requesting that they summon Donatella Bastianeri, his lawyer. In a flashback, a young village boy, Antonello, manifests a mysterious, fiery power. His parents, seeing his talent, encourage him to study hard to become a great magic user. But their kindness is a lie. They sell him to shadowy men who call him their objective. The young Antonello is terrified as his own father betrays him for money. A powerful, silhouetted figure tells the boy that he will use his talent for her. The boy looks up, his fate now sealed by his master's command. In the present, Donatella runs urgently through the palace corridors. A palace guard calls out, telling her not to run down the hallway. She ignores him, her focus entirely on reaching the courtroom as quickly as possible. She approaches the towering, ornate doors of the chamber where the trial is being held. She bursts through the doors, calling out Yuga's name in alarm. He turns to her, his face etched with desperation and relief. He pleads with her, asking for her help as he stands beside Liliana and Joan. His hands are bound before him with thick rope, a symbol of his captivity. Joan calmly explains the full details of the murder case to a stunned Donatella. Liliana stands by Yuga's side, her expression filled with grave concern. She looks on, a bead of sweat on her temple, as the situation unfolds. Joan turns to the king, asking for his opinion on the matter. The king from his throne listens intently before making his judgment. He confirms that the prosecution's logic is sound, provided Yuga can indeed use magic. Yuga turns to Donatella, his last hope, and begs her to take his case. He asks her to defend him, to somehow prove his complete innocence. Donatella looks away, asking what he is talking about, stating she can't do such a thing. She reminds him that this is not his usual style of bold defense. This is impossible. Yuga cries out that he doesn't even know what magic is, let alone how to use it. Joan watches Donatella's worried face, suggesting that Yuga is merely acting. Donatella looks over her shoulder, her expression hardening with defiance. She snaps at Joan, telling him not to be ridiculous. She knows Yuga can't use magic. Joan closes his eyes, dismissing her personal testimony as untrustworthy. He suggests with a smirk that Yuga could have been hiding his magical abilities from her. Donatella insists that Yuga's true nature, his ability to use magic, is impossible. Her voice rises with passion as she declares that he is kinder than anyone she's ever met. She stands before Yuga, vowing that he would never commit murder. Yuga looks on, his own eyes wide with shock at her passionate defense. Joan smirks, his composure unshaken by her emotional outburst. He tells her that her feelings are irrelevant in a court of law. He challenges Donatella, asking why Yuga would summon her for an emotional plea. Donatella falls silent, realizing the truth in his words. She understands that Yuga's reason for calling her wasn't based on emotion. Joan points out that she has an advantage over Yuga in this matter. He explains that she possesses a deep, intrinsic understanding of magic. Donatella ponders the nature of magic, a new strategy forming in her mind. She admits that, as far as she knows, there is no way to prove a negative. She explains that while magic leaves a trace, it's impossible to identify the caster. However, she notes that the victim in this case was killed by a binding spell. The culprit therefore must have cast this spell right beside the sleeping Yuga. The only person who could have approached the victim was the servant, Antonello. She concludes that he is the killer, asking if they don't believe her. Her hand glows with a faint light as she solidifies her resolve in her plan. Joan, taken aback, says he can't question Antonello based on her theory alone. He tells her to be silent, as her story is not progressing the trial. Donatella turns, her voice firm, and demands that they summon Antonello Mockley. Yuga, looking weary, quietly calls her name. He offers a quiet word of reassurance, putting his trust in her completely. She promises him that they will absolutely win this trial. From their high seats, King Marius, Princess Viviane, and Liliana watch the proceedings. The servant Antonello enters the court, announcing his name with a formal bow. The king looks down from his throne, welcoming the young man. Antonello asks what business the king has with him. Donatella's eye narrows as she tells him not to play dumb. She refers to the murder case at hand. She directly accuses him, asking if he is the real culprit. She points at him, declaring that he can use magic and used it to kill the victim. She demands that he speak the truth now. Yuga watches from the defendant's box, his fate hanging in the balance. Antonello scoffs, asking if she is suggesting that he, a mere servant, can use magic. He asks if she is making fun of him, his tone dripping with false indignation. Donatella is taken aback by his immediate and aggressive denial. He apologizes for his rudeness, feigning offense at being suspected by a lowly elf. He claims he only just heard of the incident and couldn't possibly be the killer. Donatella insists he is the only suspect, but he dismisses her as being persistent. He argues that human magic users are incredibly rare, making him an impossible culprit. Donatella tries to interject, but he continues his manipulative speech. He then turns the tables, suggesting that if Yuga is innocent, there's another possibility. He looks directly at Donatella, a sinister smile on his face, and asks if she is his accomplice. Donatella is utterly shocked by the brazen accusation. She asks what nonsense he is talking about. He spins a tale of a wicked elf manipulating a human to exact revenge. Donatella is left speechless by his wild, baseless claims. He declares that her unconvincing arguments are more persuasive than her logic. Yuga shouts at him to stop, telling him not to drag Donatella into his lies. Donatella realizes that if he is this type of person, her plan will be even easier. Antonello, confused, asks what she means, not understanding how he could be suspected. Donatella explains that while she can't prove he can't use magic, there is a way to prove he can. Antonello scoffs at the idea, declaring that such a thing is impossible. Donatella smiles confidently, wagging a finger as she tells him it's actually quite simple. Donatella explains that a magic user is defined by their innate use of magic. Yuga watches his assistant, nervously wondering what she is planning to do. She presents a simple analogy. A ball flying at one's face prompts an instinctive reaction. In the same way, she argues, a magic user will reflexively use magic to defend themselves. She takes a determined step forward, her focus now entirely on the servant, Antonello. Yuga watches in horror, a dreadful realization dawning on him. With grim finality, Donatella calls out Antonello's name, her voice echoing in the hall. A swirling sphere of dark energy appears in her hand as she declares her intent to kill him. Antonello is stunned as she tells him to use magic if he wishes to survive her attack. Yuga gasps in disbelief at the sheer audacity of her dangerous gambit. King Marius, equally shocked, stammers for her to wait a moment. The knight Liliana cries out for Donatella to stop, her hand on her sword. She reminds Donatella that using offensive magic in the king's court is forbidden. Donatella retorts that if she fails to act, Yuga's death sentence is unavoidable. Her eyes begin to glow with a terrifying, otherworldly power. Standing over a floor of shattered bones, she gives a single chilling command: die. A violent torrent of dark energy hurtles towards the terrified servant. The crackling sphere of necromantic power closes in on its target. Antonello lets out a choked gasp, his calm facade shattering in an instant. A close-up shows his face twisted in a mask of pure terror. At the last second, a shimmering barrier of light erupts, deflecting the spell. Yuga looks on, a bead of sweat on his temple, caught between shock and relief. King Marius observes the scene with a sharp, calculating gaze. Princess Vivienne realizes with amusement that the spell was merely a harmless illusion. She notes that while Donatella won't be charged, the outcome remains unchanged. Donatella stands defeated. She failed to clear the suspicion surrounding Yuga. She looks up in disbelief, whispering that this can't be happening. She panics, thinking she must have trained for this kind of situation. A nearby guard remarks that the criminal's desperate struggles are unseemly. Vivienne looks down at Donatella, stating that her failure is an unchangeable fact. Because of this failure, she declares, Shiba Yuga will be sentenced to death. Yuga's face is a mask of grim resignation, his fate seemingly sealed. The verdict echoes as he and Donatella stand alone in the vast courtroom. A guard walks past them, laughing cruelly at their defeat. The guard continues on his way, gloating over their failure. The defeated pair are framed by the grand, imposing columns of the hall. But Yuga, his head bowed, begins to let out a low, quiet chuckle. The princess muses that all of Donatella's efforts were ultimately for nothing. Donatella looks up, her face a picture of absolute despair. The princess acknowledges Donatella's talent, but notes that it was not enough. Donatella is speechless, all her hopes seemingly extinguished. A guard tells her that everything she did was a complete waste of time. Antonello feigns confusion, asking why the guard is looking at him like that. He sneers at Yuga, saying it's a shame his head wasn't right. He then lets out a cascade of loud, triumphant laughter. A flashback shows Donatella casting a curse-warding spell on Yuga's tie. Antonello recalls identifying the strange cloth as a focus for defensive magic. This powerful enchantment was meant to guarantee Yuga's absolute safety, but Donatella narrates that in reality the spell was broken and danger befell him. She accuses Antonello of being the talented magic user who shattered her ward. She passionately questions why he would use such a rare gift for murder. He watches her emotional plea with a cold, detached expression. She screams that the man he's trying to kill is a hero who uses his power for good. The god girl, from her own realm, watches the scene unfold. Yuga stands silently behind Donatella as she makes her desperate appeal. Donatella declares that Shiba saved her life and is her personal savior. She drops to her knees, begging Antonello to confess his sins. She implores him to admit his crime and use his power for good. Antonello seems to consider her words, a memory stirring within him. A flashback shows a young boy vowing to become a knight and defeat evil with magic. Back in the present, he looks down at the pleading elf girl. He concedes that using magic for murder is certainly a mistake. He pauses for a moment, then adds a chilling, dismissive, "but." His face twists into a sneer as he denies everything, asking what she is talking about. He tells the foolish elf that he has no time to deal with her ramblings. He condescendingly asks if her pointless argument is finally finished. He lets out a small, contemptuous chuckle at her expense. He dismisses her plea as a masterpiece of emotional manipulation to sway the court. He claims it's just a useless distraction before the inevitable death sentence. Yuga tries to interject, but prosecutor Joan declares that further discussion is pointless. Joan agrees with Antonello, his eyes closed in smug certainty. King Marius nods, ready to bring the trial to a close. Joan formally requests that the king make his final judgment. Donatella cries out in horror, "No!" She begs them to wait, knowing that if they don't, Yuga will be killed. She has a horrifying vision of Yuga's head locked in a guillotine. She urges him to think of something else, anything to stall for time. Joan dismisses her plea, stating that the king does not have time for this. Princess Vivienne, however, offers a slight, intriguing "but." She smiles behind her fan, noting that her intricate plan is proceeding smoothly. Her scheme: Yuga is sentenced to death, but the execution is delayed. He will be pardoned only if he pledges his undying loyalty to her. He will then be eternally grateful to the one who saved his life. And she, Princess Vivienne, will become the new true king. Donatella whispers an apology to Yuga, feeling that she has failed him. Vivienne declares that she always gets what she wants and urges the king to proceed. Donatella looks on in absolute terror, her eyes wide with fear. She turns to Yuga, her last hope in this desperate situation. Joan tells Yuga that it is troubling to challenge such an important judgment. Yuga speaks up, his voice steady, telling the prosecutor to wait a minute. He turns his back to the court, asking what Joan just said. The key players look on, confused and annoyed by his strange question. The princess asks if he's speaking to her, but he says she's wrong to ask for a judgment. She snaps her fan shut, a flicker of concern in her eyes. He's noticed something. Yuga's mind flashes back to the crucial exchange about the necktie. Joan confirms to the king that the conversation about the necktie did happen. Yuga asks what of it, then declares that something about it is very strange. He smiles, a triumphant glint in his eye as he asks what a necktie is. He turns to the prosecutor, asking if he, Joan, knows what it is. Joan, his eyes closed, calmly admits that he has no idea. Joan Wyson questions Yuga about the cloth wrapped around his neck. Donatella watches, confused, having never heard of a necktie before. Yuga smirks, preparing to turn the tables with a question of his own. He asks Antonello how he knew a necktie was a piece of cloth. Yuga presses the point, his gaze sharp and unwavering. He turns to the servant, asking if his knowledge isn't a bit strange. Yuga knows the necktie is an item from Japan, unknown in this world. Antonello is questioned again, his composure beginning to crack. Yuga calls on Donatella, asking her to explain the truth to the court. Donatella states the simple fact: Antonello knew the necktie was cloth. He knew this because the object that had been cursed was, in fact, cloth. She declares he knew because he was the one who broke her curse. Caught, Antonello clicks his tongue in frustration. He stammers that he was just following the flow of the conversation. Donatella shouts, "That's impossible. No one was even talking about neckties." Antonello grits his teeth, his feeble excuse completely destroyed. Donatella steps forward, pressing her irrefutable point. The king listens intently, his expression grave. Princess Vivienne watches the lawyer's trap unfold, intrigued. Donatella points accusingly at the true culprit before the entire court. Prosecutor Joan looks on, his own case rapidly falling apart. She makes her final stunning declaration: Antonello is a magic user. The king muses that a single statement is not enough to secure a conviction. Donatella looks shocked, realizing her argument might not be enough. Antonello stammers that he is just a humble servant. The king declares Antonello a strong suspect, but a full investigation is required. He orders a thorough background check on the servant, from birth to present. The final verdict is postponed, giving Yuga and Donatella a moment of relief. The king dismisses Yuga but orders him to be kept under close watch. From her seat, Princess Vivienne clicks her tongue in annoyance. She remarks how unusual it is for a trial to end without a verdict. She snaps her ornate fan shut with a sharp sound. She wonders aloud if the second trial will proceed as planned. As guards lead him away, Antonello looks back in terror. The king reassures his daughter Vivienne not to worry. Antonello pleads, saying he refuses to go. He screams that he doesn't want to die as a magic circle erupts at his feet. A guard shouts in alarm, recognizing the sudden display of powerful magic. The guards call out to the king, awaiting his command. Liliana draws her sword, ordering Antonello to be apprehended at once. Antonello begs them to capture him, his desperation growing. He pleads for his life, begging them not to kill him. The royal court watches the servant's frantic, desperate plea. Joan's expression is grim as the situation spirals out of control. Princess Vivienne watches coolly from behind her fan. Donatella leaps in front of Yuga, telling him to get back. Her eye glows as she unleashes a powerful binding spell. Instantaneous harm. A torrent of dark magical energy explodes from her hands. Yuga looks on, a bead of sweat tracing his temple. Antonello looks up, shocked by the sudden, overwhelming counterattack. His eyes widen in pure terror as the spell engulfs him completely. Yuga watches as his assistant stands over their neutralized foe. Antonello is thrown violently backwards, his body contorting in agony. The force of the spell blasts the royal guards away from the blast zone. The guards wonder if it was magic or if the man simply self-destructed. The king orders the castle sealed and the magic investigation squad summoned. Yuga turns to Donatella, asking what just happened. King Marius closes his eyes, processing the violent chaos in his court. He turns to Yuga and offers a sincere apology for his suspicions. He admits it was a mistake to doubt a man guided by the gods. He states that while an investigation is needed, the trial's conclusion is obvious. The king prepares to deliver his final, decisive verdict. His voice booms, declaring Shiba Yuga not guilty. Back home, Yuga boasts that Donatella saved his life once again. Donatella shyly insists that Yuga did everything himself. Yuga smiles warmly, thanking her for her invaluable help. He says he would be dead without her, as Lorencia praises her skills. Donatella blushes deeply, clutching her teacup in embarrassment. She tells Lorencia that she was just doing her duty as an assistant. Yuga grows thoughtful, realizing he has learned a valuable lesson. He notes that while Lorencia is a very capable maid, and Donatella has skills that she and only she can provide. She clenches her fist, declaring this is her path as his assistant. Their peaceful moment is suddenly shattered by an unexpected arrival. Yuga is startled to see Liliana burst through the door. Liliana, distraught, says something terrible has happened and begs him to come. She reveals that the unthinkable has occurred to Princess Vivienne. Vivienne has been arrested, shown being led away in custody. Yuga is stunned by the news of the princess's arrest. His entire household demands to know what has happened. He stands, declaring he must go and hear the full story immediately. Liliana gravely informs him that the situation is far from simple. Her face is a mask of despair as she explains that if things continue, the entire kingdom of Luano will be destroyed. Yuga and Donatella stare, the weight of her words sinking in. A massive, angry crowd has gathered in the city's central square. Several powerful nobles are locked in wooden stocks upon a platform. Yuga pushes through the throng, trying to get to the front. He and Donatella look upon the grim scene with shock. Yuga asks in horrified disbelief what this spectacle is. He realizes with dawning terror that it is an execution ground. King Marius raises his hand, addressing the citizens of his kingdom. He introduces himself as King Marius Luano, his voice booming. He declares that the condemned have committed a heinous crime. They plotted to overthrow him, an act of high treason against the state. Joan Wyson gestures for the final prisoner to be brought forward. Yuga and Donatella watch, their faces pale with dread. Princess Vivienne is presented to the enraged crowd as the ringleader. The king declares his own daughter is the mastermind of the rebellion. His voice rings out, sentencing her to immediate execution. Shiba Yuga stands amidst chaos, demanding to know what is happening. The knight Liliana admits that she too has not heard the details. A hand holds a pact sealed in blood, the key evidence. Yuga furiously asks if a blood oath is enough for an execution. The first princess watches gravely, knowing what must be done. She declares their true goal is to save the lives of everyone involved. A vast landscape illustrates the power of the condemned noble houses. A dark, empty street foreshadows the coming civil war. Yuga learns that rebel armies are already beginning to gather their forces. Liliana grimly concludes that if this continues, Luano will be destroyed. Donatella asks in disbelief if anyone tried to reason with the king. Liliana closes her eyes, recalling her many failed attempts to persuade him. The king's furious eye reveals his vow to crush all who oppose him. A frantic voice from the crowd calls out Yuga's name. A panicked Renette Gelvia appears, desperately begging Yuga for help. He grabs Yuga's collar, reminding him that they are friends. Renette cries out that his father, Lord Gelvia, is about to be killed. Yuga stumbles back as the first princess makes her formal request. Liliana joins the plea, telling Yuga that he is their only hope. The first princess begs him to defend the accused and save Luano. Yuga points to himself, stunned by the impossible weight of their request. The first princess insists he must prove their innocence to stop the execution. Renette begs him to act, as his father's life hangs in the balance. Donatella looks up at Yuga, her expression filled with quiet concern. Overwhelmed, Yuga looks down at his own hands, feeling utterly powerless. He begins to voice his doubt, his confidence completely shattered. He believes there is no way he can possibly succeed in this task. He remembers his past failures, convinced he cannot save an entire country. He turns away, admitting he has no evidence and no idea what happened. The empty execution platform symbolizes the unwinnable situation he now faces. He feels a small hand take his, a silent gesture of support. He looks at Donatella, who gazes back with absolute faith in him. His resolve hardens. He is a lawyer, and he will not give up. The crowd watches as a lone figure strides toward the platform. Yuga announces himself to the court as the god-chosen lawyer, Shiba Court. The king looks down, asking what business he has at the execution. Yuga declares that treason is not a crime under their new laws. He challenges the king, asking if this isn't a violation of God's law. He demands the execution be stopped, ready for a trial on the spot. The king scoffs, accepting the challenge to hold the trial right there. He orders his prosecutor, Joan, to begin, asking if he understands. Joan coldly dismisses Yuga's desperate warnings about the kingdom's fate. He states that he will fulfill his duty and Yuga should fulfill his. Yuga is taken aback by the prosecutor's unwavering, cold resolve. Joan turns to the king and begins his opening statement. He formally accuses Princess Vivienne and 8 nobles of the crime of murder. He recounts the recent murders of Kara Velksman and Luciana Velg. He claims these murders were a conspiracy orchestrated by the 9 accused. He explains the princess's motive was to recruit allies and a lawyer. The princess listens impassively, accused of plotting to seize the throne. Joan cites the law of complicity, demanding death for all conspirators. Yuga stares in disbelief at the prosecutor's seemingly outlandish claims. He raises his hand to object, questioning the logic of the conspiracy. The first princess agrees, finding the plan too convoluted to be true. She argues that the young princess would never attempt such a grand scheme. Yuga insists that such an accusation is impossible without any evidence. Joan smirks, retorting that it is possible through one simple method. He reveals the method was magic, an arcane sigil flashing in his eye. Yuga and Donatella listen as he names the forbidden magic, alteration. Joan explains that the princess used this magic to manipulate memories. An eye reflects the scene as he details how false memories were planted. The crowd erupts, shocked that the princess was a hidden magic user. Joan announces that he has evidence and will now call his witness. Yuga is horrified as the servant Antonello is brought to the stand. Antonello is asked to confirm if the princess can use alteration magic. The princess watches him, her expression cold and completely unreadable. From behind, Antonello confirms that the prosecutor's claim is absolutely true. He testifies that the princess nearly altered his own memory. He claims her magic made him forget how to breathe, almost killing him. He says he only survived because of Donatella's protective spell on the necktie. He makes his final damning confession. He murdered on the princess's order. Joan is stunned, caught off guard by the direct and absolute confession. The king declares that there is no doubt his daughter is the murderer. He turns to Vivienne, asking if she has any excuse for her crimes. Yuga and Donatella watch helplessly, their case seemingly destroyed. The princess closes her eyes and confesses that she ordered the murders. She admits that she and her followers were planning to usurp the throne. Yuga is shocked as the crowd realizes the princess has admitted her guilt. She states that there is only one reason for her treasonous actions. Before the royal standard, she declares that the kingdom is too weak. The king listens as she acknowledges and respects his deep love for peace. But her face contorts in a snarl as she calls his nature too soft. She warns of the looming threats of invasion and elven rebellion. She proclaims that the kingdom needs military power to survive. If someone does not act decisively, she declares, Luano will perish. She asks the king to let her execution serve as an admonition. The king grunts, accepting her tragic but necessary sacrifice for the realm. He tells Vivienne that she speaks eloquently, despite her tear-stained dignity. He raises his sword, announcing that he will execute her himself. The crowd murmurs, preparing to watch the beautiful princess die. The first princess gasps in despair, all her hope now seemingly lost. An old nobleman in the crowd touches his neck, anticipating the beheading. The princess's long hair flows as she awaits her imminent death. Yuga watches intently, his mind racing to find the flaw in her story. The crowd erupts into a unified, bloodthirsty chant, screaming for death. Donatella and the first princess look on in horror, urging him to hurry. Donatella turns to him, desperately asking what he is going to do. Yuga, facing away from them, states that the princess's story is strange. He wonders aloud why she never tried to use her magic on him. He has a sudden realization, understanding that his own theory must be correct. Defiantly facing the execution platform, Yuga declares that he will win this trial. Vivienne questions how he can possibly win, as King Marius looks on grimly. Donatella panics, certain that Vivienne is moments away from being executed. She worries that the king is beyond reason, but Yuga calmly reassures her. With a sharp, confident smirk, Yuga vows that he will make the king listen. The chapter title appears as he proclaims his bold intent. He will stop the king. Suddenly, Griselda pushes through the crowd, frantically demanding they let her pass. Yuga is stunned to see the young inventor arriving at the chaotic scene. He mutters that this is the worst possible scenario as Donatella asks her what's wrong. Griselda explains that a thief recently broke into her shop, but she thought nothing was taken. She now realizes she was mistaken. One crucial item was stolen from her workshop. With a look of dawning horror, she reveals the stolen item was a dangerous drug. Griselda states with chilling certainty that the king has been given her creation. Donatella asks if it's the combat drug commissioned by the infamous arms dealer. Griselda confirms it is, her expression grave as she understands the implications. She explains the king's extreme agitation is a classic symptom of her drug's effects. Yuga wonders aloud who could have done this and for what purpose, receiving no answer. The king, his mind clouded, insists that the execution must not be delayed any longer. Yuga leans in close, calling Donatella's name to get her focused attention. He asks if she could identify a magic user if a spell were cast right now. She confirms she can, but wonders why anyone would use magic so openly. The king recalls seeing the princess use magic, but couldn't identify who it was. Donatella agrees to his request, certain she can succeed if she concentrates. From the stocks, Vivienne asks why he is doing this, stating she has a request. Yuga leans close to Donatella, whispering the details of his secret, audacious plan. Her eyes widen in pure shock and disbelief at the sheer insanity of his idea. She frantically tries to protest, telling him to wait, that his plan is too dangerous. He places a reassuring hand on her head, calling her his excellent assistant. With a warm, trusting smile, he tells her that he is counting on her completely. Donatella, flustered and blushing, stammers that she isn't worthy of such praise. She continues to argue against his plan, believing it to be a suicidal gambit. She fears his actions will get them all killed, but he has already turned away. Yuga strides forward, commanding the attention of the entire gathered crowd. He raises his hand, declaring he has one final thing to confirm as the princess's lawyer. Prosecutor Jones scoffs at the interruption, dismissing the lawyer's words as a nuisance. The crowd roars for blood, demanding the rebel be killed and the trial be ignored. A unified chilling chant of "kill her" rises from the bloodthirsty mob. Sweating under the pressure, Yuga pleads with the enraged people to just listen. The king declares that this is the will of the people and resolves to proceed. Vivienne, her voice calm, asks her father to wait just a moment longer. Jones surprisingly intervenes, suggesting that they should hear the lawyer's argument. The king turns, surprised by his prosecutor's unexpected interjection. Vivienne insists to her father that her guilt is clear and no more talk is needed. Joan argues that this is a trial and the defendant must not be denied any hope. He states that in Luano, a nation of law, all illegal acts must be punished. The king relents, challenging Yuga to make his case before he is cut down. Yuga looks at Joan, confused, wondering if the prosecutor just saved him. Joan simply adjusts his glasses, his true motives remaining a complete mystery. Yuga, seizing the opportunity, turns to address the condemned princess. He calls her not by her title, but simply by her given name, Vivienne. He makes a stunning demand, telling her to use her alteration magic on him. Joan and Vivienne are both left speechless by his completely bizarre request. Vivienne can only manage a confused "eh?" in response to the lawyer's words. Griselda screams in disbelief, questioning what on earth has gotten into him. The crowd, including Renette, murmurs in confusion, wondering what he is saying. Yuga raises a finger, explaining that while evidence is plentiful, one thing is unproven. He smiles, revealing the crucial missing piece of the prosecution's case is feasibility. He states that the proof of the princess's ability to use magic is still incomplete. He challenges her to prove her power by using her magic on him right now. The princess remains silent for a long moment, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. She refuses, questioning the point of proving what she has already confessed to. Yuga dismisses her refusal as a pointless farce and calls her out by name again. Vivienne glares at him, asking if he wishes to prolong his life, calling him unsightly. He compliments her moving speech, admitting her feelings for her country are genuine. He argues that losing this trial would be a colossal, unrecoverable failure for the nation. He challenges her directly, asking if she wants to be responsible for that failure. If not, she should die properly for her country. She agrees that would be good. She turns her full, furious attention on him, calling out his name with venom. She vows to make him forget everything, to completely erase his identity. Renette cries out for Donatella to stop her as Vivienne's magical threat intensifies. She promises to make him forget he was ever a lawyer, or even that he was human. Her eyes widen, glowing with an immense and terrifying magical power. A wave of arcane energy washes over Yuga, his own eyes reflecting the power. He clutches his head, gasping in agony as the magic assaults his mind. Vivienne sneers, saying he died in vain and that his actions were meaningless. Yuga stumbles back, pointing a finger, a single word of realization on his lips. Donatella cries out his name in alarm as he collapses from the magical attack. Vivienne's eyes narrow, confused by his reaction and what it could possibly mean. Yuga falls to his knees, seemingly defeated by the princess's overwhelming power. But he looks up, a triumphant, knowing grin spreading across his face as he declares victory. Vivienne is completely baffled, asking what he means by this sudden turn of events. A massive, intricate, magical circle begins to materialize on the wooden platform. The glowing circle expands with blinding speed, engulfing the entire execution stage. A deafening explosion of light and power erupts from the platform in a brilliant flash. The crowd recoils in shock and terror, wondering what just happened. Liliana cries out for the king and Princess Vivienne, fearing for their safety. Joan stares at the aftermath, pointing and identifying the true magical culprit. He declares that this is an elven rebellion and orders the woman to be seized. The real magic user looks on, surprised, before being told to wait. Donatella explains that unlike Antonello, this person reflexively defended herself. Selena Ritter stands amidst the magical energy, revealed as the true mastermind. The guards are stunned by the display, exclaiming that she is using magic. The king recognizes her as Vivienne's secretary and questions her actions. Donatella declares that the one who just used alteration was not the princess. Selena confirms it, stating she felt no magic coming from the princess at all. Donatella explains there was no reason for the princess to hold back her power. She concludes the princess cannot use magic, she was merely made to think she could. The king asks Donatella if this is true, and she confirms it without a doubt. Donatella stands over a recovering Yuga, explaining his plan to expose the truth. Joan confirms he witnessed Selena use magic, finally understanding the grand deception. "I was entrusted with this," Donatella shouts, her voice filled with conviction. "I will not allow the princess to be framed as a murderer." She's not guilty. Selena Ritter watches the passionate display, her expression sharp and calculating. Princess Vivienne, trapped in the stocks, looks up in utter shock. Donatella turns her gaze, directly accusing the princess's advisor. "Isn't that right, Selena?" Prosecutor Joan demands to know if Selena has anything to say for herself. Selena calmly states that she will restrain him for his insolence. She brings a hand to her mouth, unable to hide a triumphant smirk. "It was difficult," she confesses, "hiding my magic to infiltrate the castle." She laments that her grand plan to overthrow the nation was so close to success. A bewildered Joan demands to know why she would orchestrate such a rebellion. A dangerous glint appears in Selena's eyes from behind her glasses. She pulls back her hair, revealing a pointed ear. "Because I am an elf." Princess Vivienne and Joan stare, stunned by the shocking revelation. Selena laughs coldly, admitting her entire identity and history were a complete fabrication. She gestures grandly, preparing to explain the true motive behind her betrayal. Her eyes burn with righteous fury. "Let me ask you, what's wrong with revenge?" A flashback reveals the elven disturbance was actually a human war for power. She explains that the persecuted elves were only fighting for their rights. "What's wrong with revenge?" she snarls. "After they crushed our people." King Marius, beads of sweat on his brow, is left utterly speechless. Selena turns her manipulative gaze towards Donatella, a tempting offer ready. Donatella is shocked as Selena addresses her by her full name. "We are of the same race," Selena purrs, "comrades with great power." She proposes that if they join forces, the elven race can be revived. With a flick of her wrist, she unleashes her magic, sending guards flying. She declares she will kill everyone, spark a civil war, and build an elven nation. Donatella watches, horrified by Selena's monstrous declaration of intent. Princess Vivienne and Liliana look on, powerless against the magical onslaught. The king and prosecutor Joan can only stare as chaos consumes the square. From the crowd, Griselda calls out Donatella's name in alarm. Donatella grits her teeth, her voice ringing with defiance. "No way!" Selena calmly asks her why she would refuse such a glorious opportunity. "Have you been tamed by humans?" she asks. Donatella flatly denies it. She refuses because Selena's plan is a violation of the law. Selena scoffs, noting that Sheba would surely oppose such reckless force. "Not with violence," Donatella shouts, demanding a solution through law and reason. Selena sighs, her patience wearing thin. "I suppose there is no other way." Surrounded by glowing arcane circles, she prepares to slaughter everyone in the square. A guard is violently thrown back by the sheer force of her magic. Another guard screams in terror, telling the panicked crowd to run for their lives. Liliana rallies her soldiers, ordering the royal guard to take their positions. Yuga tells Donatella she can win, but she replies that she must escape. Selena smiles, relishing the thought of a good fight after so long. Liliana takes charge, commanding her troops to follow her into the fray. She leaps into battle, intent on capturing the culprit as Selena looks on. Donatella stands ready, a massive and intricate necromantic seal glowing behind her. A cheerful voice cuts through the chaos. "Sorry to keep you waiting." Yuga floats in a strange void, his last memory a blur of magic. He looks up at a small floating figure, weakly calling out to God. "It's been a while," he says, asking what happened to the trial. The god girl grabs him, enthusiastically praising his excellent performance. She declares that thanks to his great sacrifice, Luano's destruction was averted. She notes that while everyone worked together, many were injured in the fight. Yuga is relieved it worked out, but the god girl gives him the credit. He looks confused, not understanding what she means by his contribution. She laughs, calling him clever for choosing her by a process of elimination. He brushes it off, demanding to know what happened to him. What became of me? He asks. The god girl looks at him curiously. I was hit by magic, he insists. What is my current state? The god girl giggles, asking what nonsense he's talking about. With a brilliant, cheerful smile, she announces, "You're dead!" Yuga's face freezes in a silent, horrified gasp of realization. This is the second time, she teases, poking him. You should be used to it. Yuga's eye twitches as he thinks of the shock his friends must be feeling. After the battle, the kingdom celebrated, having defeated a powerful enemy. Griselda notes that the usually stoic Donatella was sobbing uncontrollably. The god girl scolds Yuga for making a woman cry. He looks away, embarrassed. Anyway, she says, how about I give you a reward for your hard work? Really, Yuga asks, surprised by the offer. You'll do that for me? She smiles, saying it's just a small token of her appreciation. I'll bring you back to life, she offers with a sweet smile. In your own world, she clarifies, in Japan. He stares at an image of Tokyo. She teases him, saying he must miss Japanese food by now. He hesitates, considering the offer, but the god girl seems unimpressed. What is it? She demands. Are you sure you're okay with staying here? He asks her to let him stay. She agrees if he's truly decided. She blushes furiously, accusing him of having fallen in love with her. Fine, whatever, she mutters, turning away from him. She accepts his decision, preparing to send him back. I'll be counting on you from now on, she says with a cheerful wave. Back in Luano, King Marius presides over a state funeral. He declares that Shiba Yuga gave his all for the sake of the kingdom. Joan reflects on Yuga's incredible achievements as a lawyer. He saved countless people, including Renette, Griselda, and the young thief, Marte. The king laments that before he could reward him, Shiba died. Donatella, clutching a rose, calls his death the greatest regret of her life. The living Yuga's eyes widen, trying to comprehend the scene before him. He sees his own body lying peacefully in an open casket. He points a trembling finger. What is this? Is this my funeral? Donatella and Joan stare, their faces masks of stunned disbelief. He screams in terror as Joan shouts that the fiend has returned to life. Donatella rushes forward, throwing her arms around him in a tearful, joyous hug. Liliana smiles warmly while Prosecutor Joan discreetly wipes a tear from his eye. Some time passed after the dramatic events at the royal castle. Yuga had fully returned to his life in the world of Luano. His resurrection had only enhanced his fame as the god-chosen lawyer. Donatella happily enjoys a meal, thanking their skilled maid, Lorencia. However, a new concerning presence had joined their peaceful household. The former princess, Vivienne, announces that she has joined the staff as a maid. Princess Vivienne, though acquitted, renounced her title to live as a commoner. Now his maid, the former princess, lectures him, much to his profound annoyance. Yuga and Donatella travel through the capital's cobblestone streets by carriage. Donatella questions Yuga's decision to accept his new controversial defense case. Their new client is Selena Ritter, the mastermind behind the recent treason plot. From behind bars, she stares back with cold, unyielding, and unrepentant defiance. Yuga declares that everyone, no matter their crime, has the right to a lawyer. Donatella knows this will be a difficult case, as they have no information. Despite the odds, he vows to defend his new client with all his strength. He explains his motivation. He would want the same empathy shown to him. He embraces his title, the lawyer of the heretical law, ready for battle.